All right. Damn. That was that was a recording of Franz Liszt's Transcendental Etude number 6, titled Vision by Gregor Quendel. Gregor Quendel. Thanks for coming out, Gregor. Appreciate it. Everyone else, hello, everyone. Hello. You are not Gregor, but thank you as well for coming out. Appreciate it. That was the music I picked because I couldn't find anything else. The pickings for royalty-free classical recordings are very slim. Or they have like the gross content ID stuff that forces me to probably put ads on my videos, and I want to try to avoid that. So I should really just buy licensing for some music. I've been looking into that recently. What else did I want to say? Oh yeah, I found a good recording of Bach's Little Fugue. Um, and it immediately hit me that I should have used that for last episode, and I didn't, so that sucks. We're stuck with whatever I used last episode. I think it was Chopin. I'm not sure. I don't remember. Neither here nor there. We are here now. We are present. We're here for episode. It's episode 28. Yep, episode 28. I kind of lost the plot after last time. It's we talked about so much crap that I just had to kind of purge it from my mind. Once again, we have a lot of crap. We have 22 pages worth of crap. If you'll remember from a few episodes ago, I managed about 16 pages on average. So it's not looking good. We're off to a rough start. The summary here is going to be bare bones. And then I'm just going to try and whip through this as quickly as possible. I'm going to try to stay focused and stay on track and not ramble. Some of these points are small, some of them are big, some of them are really big. I might just skip some things. We might get to like the 2 hour mark, and I might just start skipping stuff. I do not want to make this into a 2-part episode. It's on the cusp of being doable while being pretty big, and I just don't want to make it 2 episodes, so I'm not gonna. It made sense for chapter 35. That's how deep and important those things were. But for this one, it's like whatever. It's not whatever. This is probably one of the most important chapters in the book, but for the sake of timeliness, I'll cut it at 3 hours. Right? We won't go over 3 hours. That'd be ridiculous. Hence why we're perhaps starting a little early today. Let me get situated here. Let me get comfortable in my seat. And let me get y'all. Let me get y'all. Y'all there. Hi, y'all. Let me get y'all a summary. Let's get going. And like I mentioned, this is a very brief summary. This doesn't do the chapter justice, but I'm going to go over the main beats because they are easy to summarize. So it's chapter 38. Teal just got impaled. Surprise! Teal just got impaled. In chapter 38 here, if the reader has decided to press ahead, Teal comes to within the confines of a strange box. It's never outright said, but I'm going to say it here because this is going to change a little bit. The idea isn't going to change, but the presentation of the idea will change. She's supposed to be stuck in an elevator, and that's never outright mentioned, so I'm just going to say it Teal now. So Teal's stuck in an elevator. At first, she's pretty confused, then she gets really angry, and as reality sets in, Teal grows hopeless. Throughout all of this, Teal parses all of the information of her second death. There's a lot going on in her mind right now. There's not a lot going on physically, but there's a lot going on generally in that little half-elf head of hers. So she sits there for a while. She ruminates on her first death, which was, it's revealed to be at the hand of a band of no good nicks. Some more on that in the book if you want to read about it. She thinks about her loved one. She thinks about her past, yada yada. Flooded with remorse, Teal breaks down and begins to weep. You'll also note here that part of the reason I'm skimming through all of this is because it's really emotional, and I don't want to talk about it because I don't want to cry on mic. I'm not on camera. I'm just vibing here. I mean, like, I guess I'm on camera, right? I'm right here. How's it going? And this is the void, but it's not really a camera. It's kind of, I'm just sitting here and y'all are here. We just happen to be in the void at the same time. It's kind of weird like that. Blah, blah, blah. Teal starts to cry. Yep. As she's really going through it, the elevator opens up into an infinite nothing. And Teal wanders forth into it willingly. I believe she kind of just goes out and lies down, if I remember correctly. She just lies down in the infinite expanse of nothing. While she's there, she experiments with being not alive, right? She's conscious, but she's definitely dead. So she is not alive. We'll refer to it as that. Teal has gone full not alive. And I can see Robin talking in the chat. Robin, I can't actually see chat. I don't know what you're saying. If it's important, let me know. I'll try to move my mic a little bit here, maybe. I can see it a bit better now. I'm definitely not looking at it. My mic is right in the way. But just so y'all know, just so everyone knows, I can't see chat. I saw Robin say it's not important, and yes, I no offense, Robin. I wasn't about to derail the entire podcast just to answer you. Cries, I read the notes. So Teal experiments with being not alive, but she soon settles on just detaching her mind and body. She deviates. She splits her consciousness from her physical form because her physical form doesn't really have a purpose in a place that is nothing. On the verge of attaining some sort of like tranquility, Teal is pestered by an apparition of her sister Azure. Azure shows up, you know, when you're just hanging out when you're dead and your half-sister shows up. Love that. That's an Azure moment for sure. The two talk at length, and Azure encourages Teal to love what she had in her life. They almost kind of argue a little bit. Once again, I'm doing this section no justice. There is much more nuance to their conversation in the prose, but for now, we got to keep moving on. Azure finally kind of like disappears. There's a sort of, I don't want to say sort of, it's a pretty heartfelt moment where Azure disappears. And afterwards, Teal is once again left alone and is forced to reconcile with her demise. Her mind and body, you know, kind of split further, and her mind attempts to depart, leaving the body to rest in peace. It's in this process, however, that the body halts the mind, and in an emotional plea, begs the mind to understand the value of their combined collective life. And once we finally get to the end, the chapter concludes with Teal cementing within herself that despite everything, she, in fact, deserves to live. Crazy how that is. It's almost like most people, in fact, deserve to live. But with that, hey, that's the summary. Thanks for coming. That's the episode, folks. I'll see y'all next week. Just kidding. There's a lot to it. Like I said, this episode's not going to do this chapter justice, and we are going to have to fly by the seat of our pants here. But I will try to get the main issues out of the way. There's a lot to fix. Like I said, a lot of what this chapter is the presentation of what there is to fix. I'm going to move my microphone a little bit again. There we go. That's better. A lot of what we have to fix is the presentation, like I said. And it's important that we fix it, because if we adjust the presentation, the core themes will ring a lot truer. And like I see Robin saying in the chat, the idea is to formulate a chapter that from start to finish is like, it's weird to say it because it's not action-packed, but we need a momentum. We need a momentum so that once we get to the end, there is just a gigantic snowball which crashes into the reader, which makes these final lines, which are, you know, the final lines are probably one of the few things that are not being adjusted. The final lines are going to be, you know, the that which pierces the soul, so to speak. That's the idea anyway. You know, make a real statement here. I don't know if it's a statement that like people will get value from anyways, but this is what I wanted to write about, and it's what Teal deserves. So it's what she's going to get because, you know, it's fair. It's all for Teal in the end of the day, right? Got to do that. Got to do it for her. And that's what we're doing. That's what we're doing here. So let's dive into the notes here. I am going to scroll through the book on the right-hand side of the screen, my left-hand side. And so you can read along if you want, but I am going to apologize now because I'm probably not going to keep up with it very well because there's a lot to adjust as we go along. Let's begin here, though. The setup here is fine. We have this kind of, we switch in this chapter to a first-person present perspective as opposed to our third-person past perspective that we've been using all throughout the book. And I do that to confide within the reader, right? After this passage, it is no longer simply just the acts of Teal, the accounts of Teal, right? It's not just a summation of what's going on, of what she's doing. It is her in the present. And it's kind of awkward because her in the present is at the start recounting the recent past, but we do catch up with Teal in the present. And once we catch up with Teal in the present and her current emotions and how she's feeling right now, this style, this method of presentation helps us intertwine ourselves as readers with Teal in her current situation. And her current situation is she's dead. So it's really hard. It's really hard to present that in a third person perspective because we are no longer viewing Teal. We cannot view Teal. She has died. And so the only perspective we have left is this weird liminal reality in which she is embodying. But that aside, the setup at the start is fine, but I think, right, she's stuck in the box. She kind of comes to, like I said. But it's important that we emphasize how hopeless she feels in this situation, how she immediately comes to and just has this sense of like being confined, of being trapped within a space that is, not expansive. There's being trapped in a room, and then there's being trapped in a room that's way too small. This is definitely way too small. She feels as though there's a level of discomfort to what's going on. So we need to immediately inject chapter 38 with a bit of despair, right? We're kind of flipping a switch here from a bad thing happened to what are the ramifications of the bad thing that just happened. And the ramifications are Teal feels bad. Teal feels really bad. So we need to kind of there's a bit like there's a bit of murk right now. There's a bit of confusion, and I think we need to just alter that somewhat. I don't think completely dispelling her confusion is proper, but like I said, there needs to be more hopelessness here in the start of Teal's foray into this unknown. There is a bit of awkwardness to her coming to. We don't really get a good sense, and this is what I mean by she's supposed to be in an elevator, but we don't talk about it, but we kind of just allude to it. And I don't think I do a terrible job leading readers towards the conclusion. I don't think I do a great job. I drop little hints in there, but it's hard to say what you're trying to get to without just saying it. We just don't really have a great sense of where Teal is, of like the space she is residing within. There's, sorry, my dog's barking outside. It's definitely not coming up on mic, but it's very distracting. And there's just some actions that are missing from Teal, right? Like she should lurch up in a panic. When she comes to, she should, there should be a physical response to the awakening that she goes through. I think something that I want to keep is the fact that Teal sort of takes a minute. She takes a minute. She takes a moment. When you've got about a minute, but less than a moment, that's a minute. Teal takes this moment to inspect herself, to check herself over. And I think that's good that Teal's instinct is like, both how and why is my physical form still present? Right? She's obviously still in pain, but she, there should be a sense of like, owing to the confusion. How am I here? Why am I here? How am I whole? Should I not be holy? Maybe you are holy, Teal. And in regards to that, part of this action that we should incorporate to ground Teal in space should be, should involve her chest in general. and specifically her checking out her chest, making sure there is not a gaping hole in it, first and foremost. Um, we also want to tie in this aspect of fear that, like, yeah, Teal wants to make sure she is not currently impaled, that she does not have a metal rod rammed through her chest. But there should definitely be a hint of fear, of restraint, of maybe not disgust, but loathing. Like, she doesn't want to go there. She feels afraid of going there. Um, so I don't think necessarily she'll, like, you know, unbutton her shirt or what have you to check out her physical body, but it should be something that's definitely on her mind. Um, and an important thing I have here is, like, she's afraid to check is because she just can't in this moment bear the sight of seeing the scars that would be her, on her physical form. Um, she doesn't want to reconcile. She can't reconcile. I would go as far to say, in this present moment, she can't reconcile with the fact that she uh, uh, died, that she died twice. She couldn't bear the physical evidence of that. Um, so we need to kind of ground her in place and give her some reaction, especially to her present situation. I think another instance here that needs adjustment is the fact that we don't really talk about what Teal's wearing, what she has in her possession. I think I mentioned right now that things that she's missing. Yeah, I talk about things that she's missing: her cloak, her hat, her wand, the lantern, the instrument. They had all disappeared. But I think we could strip down Teal a little bit more. And I know that's kind of weird to say, but I think it's imperative that we really um, present her in this fragile state right now, that Teal doesn't even have her clothing. Um, and she does have clothing, right? She's not indecent, but I want to say that because Teal's a very vain individual, um, having her lacking her habiliments would be really damning, and that's kind of the vibe we're going for here. That after this situation, wherever Teal is presently, um, she should be in a state that is without that which she, like, any of the things of which she could find comfort in. Um, right? We are stripping her down. We're saying you are as hopeless and as cast away, right? Literally, that you are as cast away as you possibly could be. Um, I think, just making sure her skirt's on, her, like, her dress shirt, her leggings. I don't even think Teal needs shoes right now, right? Probably just like the bare minimum. Um, and honestly, like, maybe not even her skirt. Maybe her shirt's just tucked into her leggings. I don't know. The skirt's more so just there, so, like, she's a little more decent, I guess. But um, just as much as we can afford Teal in this moment. Just, like, enough to say she's clothed. And that's it. That's, like, all this, the whatever, where the whatever that she imbibes right now, that's as much as it's willing to give her. Um, and it's, like, just enough for Teal, right? It's just enough for us as readers and as a writer, for us to say, "Hubba, here's Teal. She's not naked. Don't worry." Um, but it's enough for us to show, like, yes, she is now without that which she normally covets and normally really appreciates. Um, Another aspect of this first scene is we really need to draw it out a little bit more. We need to make Teal's realization that she's stuck kind of crawl into reality. Part of this should be Teal's realization, and a big part of this should be Teal's realization that Lacrimosa isn't present. Lacrimosa's just gone. They're nowhere to be found. We can use this. We can use this as a tool going forward. Teal would obviously kind of search the scene, hoping to find them in some corner, in some disparate part of this strange box. Um, and this would be something that would act as a catalyst, getting Teal to shake off her fear of the present situation and, like, explore the confines a little bit. because she's invested in trying to find Lacrimosa and trying to find her companion. This would inevitably lead her, however, to remembering the situation that just happened, remembering the crunch, and uh, ultimately the demise of Lacrimosa. Another thing I've never outright said, but yeah, Lacrimosa is definitely dead at the end of chapter 37. Teal's definitely dead too, but she shows up here, right? But we're never really keyed in on whether or not Lacrimosa died and they come back, or whether or not they ever died to begin with. We kind of just say, yes, the lantern got crushed, and it's supposed to be inferred that, yeah, Lacrimosa probably wouldn't have survived that. We kind of bring it up a little bit right now, but we don't do a great job of incorporating it into Teal's motives, into her present state. I think that having this moment, that her Teal's remembering her remembrance of the crutch, would be what we need to spur her on into a transitional moment. Because essentially what we need to do, like I said, we're keeping the core concepts here. So we need something that's going to transition Teal to from kind of despairing to this anguish, this anger, this frustration, this rage that she enters momentarily. And it should be this moment, right? It should be this moment that she remembers, oh, yeah, Lacrimosa. I don't think they made it. I think that moment was like maybe that's why I can't find him. And this should be a really compelling moment. This should be, like I said, it should be damning for Teal to remember, yes, Lacrimosa probably died when my corpse was pitched to the ground. Her body, I guess. It wasn't a corpse then. It was still her body. But that moment, that realization should really hurt Teal as much as getting impaled did. She's probably going to start to cry, probably just filled with all sorts of remorse and guilt. But I think right now, like I said, I want this to be what manifests, what transitions Teal into this fit of rage. She probably is going to be sitting there thinking about it, but ultimately she blames the warden for what happened to Lacrimosa. And it's through this lens that Teal sees her present situation, sees her confinement, sees that she's stuck, and she ultimately blames the warden. And her blaming the warden is in part fueled by and in part directed by her anger, right? It's kind of cyclical. She's pissed off at the warden for doing all of these things. She feels like she's been wronged. She's been slighted. They hurt Lacrimosa. They can find me. I'm mad. I want to get out of here, right? That's kind of what's churning through Teal right now. And this is just something small, but like as Teal's rage shifts, as it crashes upon the shore and recedes, it ultimately like dawns on Teal that it wasn't the warden who doomed Lacrimosa. It was probably her. She was ultimately the reason that Lacrimosa was there in the first place. She had all sorts of opportunities to let them go, but at every turn, Teal was like, no, I'll just keep them with me a little longer. Teal felt that she would be safer with her companion rather than trying to set them free. So that's something, right? We're getting into these transitional notes. How do we get from Teal to despair to anger? How do we get from Teal from anger to depression? Give me a moment while I turn on a lantern. While I turn on a lantern? Yeah, let me go get my match real quick while I turn this puppy on. It's just a little dark in here. Bit of a rainy day outside today. But yeah, we need to use these little notes, these little injections that are kind of here. They're floating around, but they're not servicing anything right now. I think we need to pin them down in this first segment here and let them sing, right? Let these notes sing, because a big thing with this chapter is like Lacrimosa's kind of there, but we never outright say it. We never use it as fuel for how Teal's feeling. We can definitely reflect Teal's current emotional state via what happened to Lacrimosa, and we can use it as fuel throughout Teal's arc here, right? Because essentially the thing with the first part here, Teal is trapped. She goes through an arc, she completes the arc, and once she's at the end of the arc, that's when the elevator opens up. Once Teal is willing to come to a point of like, I guess I died. I guess I maybe died twice, right? That's pretty much the point when the elevator goes ding and opens up and Teal is free to like transition into existing in the whatever for all of eternity. She is, no longer is she actively suffering in a liminal state. She is just, you're free to go, Teal. You can go to hell. You can hang out here now. It's fine. Um, let's see here. So, I think it's good that Teal flies into this rage, right? This is a core component. Um, but I think this whole segment needs to be a lot more visceral. We don't get into how Teal is actively pounding on the glass on the inside of this elevator, how she's kicking the door, how she's, trying to dig her hands into all sorts of crevices and like actively scratch. And she's kind of going feral, right? She feels trapped and confined and imprisoned in this small space. And she's, doing everything she physically can to get out of it, even though it's hopeless. Um, and that sense of hopelessness is really what I'm trying to get across here is that Teal should be interacting with the space. There needs to be more physical elements with Teal's acting, and her actions right now just don't really have enough oomph to them to speak that like yes she is trapped in this thing and she's desperately trying to get out. Right now it's kind of just like okay well she's trapped, and that's kind of what we're reinforcing. I never get the impression that what I'm writing here is Teal is desperate to get out. It more so rings with the notion that Teal is just kind of testing the waters. She's putting up she's putting up an act. She's trying to get out because like okay well yeah she needs to do that. Who wouldn't? But it should be a lot more carnal, a lot more. I don't want to say realistic, but it should feel like Teal is trapped and wants to get out, is desperate to get out of this elevator. Just a little half note here. We kind of dropped Teal's like the loss of her banjo, and this is something that's cropped up here and there throughout our draft diaries. Is that the banjo has kind of taken a back seat, and that's really unfortunate because it is supposed like along with Lacrimosa. Lacrimosa is maybe more so of a living entity that Teal feels connected with, but Teal should also hold the banjo in quite high regard. And it never comes up here. The loss of the banjo, the fact it got punctured, the fact it got stabbed and broke apart, and like this hideous twang when Teal was stabbed never comes up. We never mention any of that, and these are all things that Teal would have noticed. Teal would have felt. Teal would in this moment feel loss, would feel once again aggrieved that something precious, like one of the few things she had in the wherever, was kind of just like thrown by the wayside. Um, so we need to tie the loss of Teal's banjo into the scene here somewhere. Um, yeah, this next part is me just illustrating like here's when it should come up. She should she should be remember it kind of in passing when she's thinking about what just happened. It should crop up again when she flies into a rage, as if she's thinking like, oh, I could use it. I could use the banjo right now. I could smash through the glass. I could pry apart the door. If only I had the banjo. If only I had a tool. If only I had anything. Um, and ultimately, when she is despairing, when she finds herself kind of at her low point within the confines of this tomb, she would probably be thinking like, dang, I wish I had my banjo. I wish I had the banjo so that I could calm myself, so that I could pass the time a little bit. And these aren't really like revelatory high emotion things. Teal isn't like mourning for the loss of a loved one here, kind of like she is with Lacrimosa. But she is definitely uh, um, expressing a guilt, a longing for a thing that she admires and felt kind of maybe like completed her life in a certain way. Um, yeah, okay. This is kind of an important point where we talk about Teal flying into a rage, and she at one point removes her gloves to claw at the door. There's kind of like this door on the one side. It's never outright specified that it's a door because Teal doesn't really. That's kind of like the weird thing. Teal doesn't know what an elevator is, nor would she ever know what an elevator is. So there's. I kind of have to describe the door as like a mechanism with a split down the middle, right? It seems as though there's two panels that merge in the middle, and if only I could pry them apart. That's kind of what Teal ends up thinking. If only I could pry these apart, then maybe I could get out of here. So she ends up taking off her gloves to do so. And right now, it's just like, okay, she goes through the moment, but what would realistically happen is she would take off her gloves and see her ring, right? And after all this time, after all that we've kind of been building up the ring on her hand, like we built it up a little bit and then we stuffed it aside and then it came back again. And we were like, no, not now. We can't talk about the ring right now. This is when we get to it, right? This is when Teal finally sees the ring. And after all she's been through, now she remembers what the ring actually is. And it's here that Teal should, like, come to terms, right? Everything comes crashing down. Both the realization that she made all these promises she didn't really keep, the fact that her loved one is no longer with her, and then probably will build to the point where Teal comes to terms with the idea that it was likely her fault that Lacrimosa is dead. Like, her being dead, sure, that's one thing. The fact that she basically killed Lacrimosa along the way inadvertently is really, the cherry on top. But it should be in this moment when Teal takes off her gloves that she sees the ring. She remembers all of these things. She's kind of just flooded with all of these regrets. And we can have this slump, this emotional speed bump that takes Teal's anger and it kind of forces it to wane. It forces it to slow. It forces it to cool and transitions it. What's that called when you cool a thing? Freezing? Not quite. It solidifies. There we go. It solidifies it into sorrow, into this deep despair. So there's a bit here where Teal is cussing in Elvish, and that's great. I think, however, we need to adjust the trajectory to better reinforce the themes and like Teal's emotional state, right? Right now she's kind of just swearing and whatnot because that's the mood, that's the vibe of the scene. But I think if we tie in her personal motivations right now, then it will, that would reflect in her speech and her mannerisms. She isn't just cussing at the warden, right? That's kind of the big thing we're trying to get across here. Teal is cussing, but she's not exactly saying it at the warden. She's probably referring to herself when she's, slinging slurs. There's this idea right now. There's kind of this pervasive idea that Teal lashes out and she's met by the reverberating rattle of the chains around her, but it should be painted more so as just like there's silence. There is no reaction from anything. Teal, the only one you're yelling at, the only one who you can hear right now is you, and thus the only one you're really swearing at is yourself. And these are mostly just personal notes that, like, yeah, there should probably be a little echo here. And we should be insinuating that, yes, Teal is not lashing out. She's not, what's that called? Not inveiglements. That's when you try to, like, sweet talk someone. Whatever. She's not swearing at the warden. The warden isn't here to hear her. She is ultimately swearing at herself and damning herself, condemning herself. She has all of these toxic things that she is expressing, and they all are ultimately directed at her own being. Because, sure, yeah, to hell with the warden, but as we realize it, Teal realizes it too, that it wasn't really the warden's fault. Sure, the warden killed her, but they were doing it because they were, like, Teal was stupid. Teal was being stupid the whole way. Teal wasn't the one who necessarily killed Lacrimosa either, but she was inevitably the instrument of their destruction. Had Teal just done things differently, had she expressed herself and like used a bit more kindness towards Lacrimosa and let them free when she thought about it, she could have prevented all of this. And that's kind of the vibe we're going for here. Teal feels like she could have prevented all of this. Oh geez, I'm doing zeros and threes all over my notes here. Don't you hate it when you click on your document and you start typing away because you got a little reaction thing tied to your number pad so that you can do little things like this, and you're on your text document, so all the numerical integers get added into your text document? No? No, is that just me? Is that just a weird thing that happens to me? Darn. Let's keep going on. So it's once Teal's rage cools that she starts to pace. She starts to walk in circles, and they're not very big circles. Obviously, this is just a small elevator, but it's something she kind of does to cope. Um, and it's this moment we latch onto, or like we should latch onto, with Teal pacing, with Teal becoming more introspective, that it's here that we should really pull her down into her despair. And I don't know, maybe we could even do some allusion to like whirlpools or something, that Teal is kind of just like circling a drain and inevitably spirals towards disparity. Um, we never really talk. We kind of just say, yes, she is pacing, but we should really dive into what she's thinking about. Uh, what, perhaps what she's not thinking about, what she's trying to ignore. Most importantly, how is she feeling right now? How is she feeling in this moment when she's just kind of pacing around and thinking? Um, there's overall something missing to this entire scene, and I'm not really sure what, but both include, it's both important that we include what Teal is experiencing and what she isn't experiencing, the lack of things that are going on right now. Um, why is it that she only hears these chains? Why is it that everything is so eerily quiet when she stops shifting around? Why is it that she has some clothes but not others? Why is it that she feels cold, but she can't actually feel any temperature on her body? Why is it that she's not bleeding anymore? There should be as many questions as there are about her present situation, about her present physical situation, as there are to like how is Steve feeling? What is she thinking about? What's going through her mind right now? So we just need to touch on these things and add them in, because right now it's once again a valuable piece of information that will get us between anger and disparity. Um, and it's through this thought process that Teal can really, spiral down. She can really be drilling down into the next step of her so-called acceptance. Um, yeah, so we're trying to draw out more of a bitterness here. Um, and in doing that, I think we really need to have Teal come to terms. She needs to think about all the different aspects of her wretched state, of what's going on right now. And bit by bit, the more evidence there is that, yeah, she is trapped in a thing, and all of her present reality comes crashing down on her, it should really hit home that, like, yeah, damn, I think I screwed up. I think I screwed up and I'm stuck now, and I don't think this is the thing I get out of. I don't think I get to go up to bat again. I think I struck out. I'm not just out of the game. I think I'm out of the league, right? Like, I'm not getting this opportunity again. It starts to really dawn on Teal that she messed up. And it's when she understands that she messed up, that she didn't do a very good job, maybe, that she starts to weep. And once Teal starts to weep, like, the big thing I'm trying to get across here is that by the time Teal gets to that point, we as readers know exactly how she's feeling and why she starts to cry, why she finally starts to break apart. Um, I really like this idea we use right now by um, referring to Teal's state of misery as being that of a tide that washes over her again and again. It comes out, it crashes over her, it goes out, it crashes over her, and every time it comes back in, Teal finds herself struggling to stay afloat. She finds herself slowly being drowned by this misery that is overcoming her. I think we could maybe improve it a little bit though, by describing it as more of a growing intensity. I've got a little example here if you want to read it. I'll leave it on screen for a minute. I'm not going to read it out loud because we got to keep going. Um, what I do want to touch on though is the fact that Teal does start crying. I can't stress enough at this moment, right? This is probably why chapter 38 is one of the most important, and like why personally I think every reader should continue on beyond chapter 37, but I have a huge bias. I have a gigantic bias in this story because I wrote it and because of how I want it to finish. But I do understand that chapter 37 is an end for Teal. And if one wishes to conclude there as a canonical ending, then that's totally valid. However, I think that this segment of the chapter, that chapter 38, is probably like one of the most important aspects of it is the fact that we give Teal an opportunity to cry. We finally allow Teal and show Teal, reveal it, that yes, she is weeping, that she is not only weeping, but she is like inconsolably, uh, uh, profusely producing tears. She is howling, she is wailing, she is like, this is not a movie cry. This is like as ugly crying gets. And she is just like probably in a puddle of her own saline solution. Um, and I think on top of that, it's really important that we stress that Teal is allowing herself to cry, right? We've mentioned that she's definitely felt like crying, that she's come close to crying here or there, but this is the one opportunity, the one chance, the one scene where we need to make it apparent that Teal is allowing herself to cry. And she's allowing herself to cry because everything around her, all of her little defenses, all of her protections, and her ego, so to speak, has finally just crumbled. No part of herself is restrained from the tide of sorrow that is emitting from her, or it was crashing over her, wasn't it? Whatever, the tide's in there. You know what I mean. These are just some corrections. I think her ruminations are really sudden. They feel kind of forced, and I definitely get that, right? Because I want, and I think I just kind of explained, or rather, the fact that I just explained it like I did is revelatory, um, in the sense that I want Teal to cry, right? I think it's important for Teal to cry. Obviously, I think in the moment Teal would definitely be going through it and would be crying, but there needs to be more nuance to it. There's just not a good transition between Teal feeling hopeless and then, um, this sentiment that like, okay, well, while I'm crying, I'm gonna think about other things. I'm gonna think about how terrible my life is. We need a thing in between here to get Teal on track between this like, uh, bitter introspection that she's going through and weaning her into this idea, this like, nostalgia almost, right? She's at the lowest point, and how do we get her to start thinking about her past? Because we need Teal to think about her past to reinforce her present. We need, like, we're finally giving readers all of the back story, all of the deep lore they've been kind of like missing out on throughout the whole story. And this is finally the opportunity to do that. Teal is at her lowest point, but how do we connect her? How do we chain her between, I'm crying, and I'm thinking about, like, I'm crying because I'm thinking about these sad things, because I want my old life back, because I'm never getting that again, because I had loved ones, because I had a place that I called home, because I was working towards things in my life. I had goals and aspirations that were cut short because of my untimely demise. Um, how do we get from point A to point B is essentially the big crux of this issue. Yes, it is important that Teal cries. We need to reinforce how she gets to that situation, and then we also need to rebuild how she gets, like, how she stays in that situation and how it kind of, uh, um, manifests into something different. Not really different. It's still despair and sorrow, but it's kind of like a different flavor, I guess. Um, yeah, there's So Teal goes through a lot of considerations, right? Like I said, she is crying and um she's also narrating, which is kind of weird. She like we catch up to Teal in the present at this moment where she's like so drawn into herself that she's having this like inner monologue that she's presenting to us as readers. And throughout here, the sentiments that she's revealing are fine. They're all really valid, but there's, like I said, there's no reason for them to come up. We never give Teal a reason to start transitioning into like recollection and nostalgia and familiarity. She just kind of starts weaning into this direction without a any motivation, any cause. So we need to get her set on that track. What she does bring up, all of her regrets, all of her indecisions, are all really lovely, and I think they all deserve a bit more inclusion. Um, but as it sounds right now, and I think it's pretty unfortunate, they're all just these really passing appraisals by Teal. We need to get Teal onto this track properly, and then once we're on the track, we can really dive into what she's considering, what she's thinking about, and how they affect her presently, and how she is reflecting on them presently. Um, so it's in this part here that Teal starts to reflect on the various reasons and like the causality of how she initially died, of what brought about her initial demise. Um, and I like that. I think it's a good move. I think it's a good way to get her going, so to speak. But I think we need to do this with a little more nuance. Um, like this is an imperative thing. This is a really important quandary that we're finally answering. How did Teal die? How did she end up where she was? This is kind of the crux of the mystery that's been floating over the book for this entire um, book. But I just think we need to transition it into this reveal with a little more subtlety. Um, like in fact, I don't know. I struggle with this part because I wonder if maybe I'm just not even clear enough. Maybe I'm not forefront at the forefront enough. Um, I'm actually not certain if it comes across by this point that Teal has died twice. The Teal, like that first, the culmination of her meeting with the warden, let's call it, wasn't her first death. I don't know if that comes across, and I don't really have like a good point of reference because the only person I know who's fully read the book is also the person who knew from the start that Teal was dead. So, uh, surprise, right? Like I don't know. How do I gauge that? Have I been clear? I think the only way I can really test that is if after draft two I have beta readers come in and something, that's something I asked them. Was it apparent that Teal died twice? Was it apparent that at this point you realized, oh, okay, so this was actually not Teal's first adventure. This was Teal's second adventure, and she effed it up too. Not that like once again it wasn't really her fault. She was kind of just doing things, and she died much like the first time. But yeah, I don't know. This is something I'm like, okay, it's a really important thing, but how do I answer it? Am I being too ham-fisted? Should I be more subtle? I don't know. Um, there's an important thing here that we're not wallowing in the aspect of how Teal is at this moment, right? And we're kind of backtracking a little bit, maybe not so much. But going throughout all of this, Teal is being forced to reconcile with everything, all of it, all of her memories come back at once. Yeah, they do. All of it, all at once. And she is being forced to juggle every feeling from every memory she ever had, right? She is sifting through all of it all at once, trying to parse these moments of her past and like put herself back together, even though she's falling apart right now. We're essentially giving Teal this speed run of her life and saying, okay, well, yeah, go ahead and relive all of it right now. All of the ups and downs, all of the traumas, all of the ecstasy, all of it right now in this moment. And all of it would be terribly painful to re-experience, right? Even the good times would be overwhelming to sift through all at once. Um, and just like we don't mention that at all, which is really silly. There's this general undertone throughout this passage, though, that Teal is kind of chastising herself. Um, and I really like that the combination between that and the fact that she's narrating in the first person, it all manifests, it adds together to create this really sinister notion that part of Teal is really cynical, and we've had little bubbles of this, but this is where it really comes out. This is the chapter where we really get to see Teal at her most bare. And if I wasn't clear about it earlier, that's high. That's why we're stripping Teal down, because she is at her most bare, because her mask has fallen off, because this is just who Teal is. And so when we get this Teal who is really cynical and really self-depreciating, we're actually, it kind of hits us. Oh yeah, Teal's been kind of mean to herself before, but now we're actually getting a decocted look at it. This is how Teal really thinks. This is how Teal really thinks about herself when she's going through and saying things like, wow, you stupid idiot, I can't believe you died twice. Only you, the miserable moron that you are, would be capable of not dying once, dying twice. Who among us can say we are as stupid and arrogant as Teal Evergarden? Oh, I know someone who could say that. It's me. Sorry, not like me. Not like me, like I was doing Teal. That was Teal saying that. I mean, like, yeah, I could probably have do Teal. I bet I could die 3 times, let's be real. 3, maybe 4. Maybe I've already died that many times. I don't know. I don't keep track. I've probably died way more than that. Maybe. Anyways, let's keep going on. That's just an important aspect here, right? Teal being cynical, it's good. It's nice. I don't think I want more cynicism. I don't think I want less. I just think, like, yeah, Teal being kind of miserable here and taking it out on herself. Like, who else would she take it out on in this moment? It's good character building, right? We're showing that Teal is actually really flawed. We were kind of poking at her flaws before throughout the story, but that, her mask was keeping her safe. Teal had this decorum. Teal had this charisma that was like deflecting a lot of her negative qualities. But here, when there's nothing to deflect off of, we just get Teal's negative qualities, which are, as a point of fact, just qualities. So Teal recounting her final moments feels like it's really lacking something. Um, I don't know. There's almost this like cold factual quality to the way she's recounting her death, her initial death, and even her scathing critique throughout here is really tepid. Like I was just saying, she's cynical. She's being mean to herself. She's being self-depreciating, and that kind of immediately falls by the wayside, and that's poor form. Um, it might be because there's just too much at once. I'm not really sure. I have here written that maybe it would be better to lead the reader through the memory at a slower pace, kind of build things up, and maybe even relive through the memory from the eyes of Teal going through it, like from kind of, we can't obviously bring people from her birth until her death, but we can start folks at a point where, okay, we lead them through the memory, right? At a slower pace, at a gentler pace. Um, it might even be something that Teal recounts as if she's telling someone a story, which she kind of is right now, so that sort of works. We can have Teal parse this information to us as readers as if she's telling us, because she is, as if she's sitting in the same room and explaining to us, this is how I died. Um, I think it's important if we do that, and like regardless of how we do that, that Teal should be caught by the pain from the moment, you know, uh, um, as if recounting, oh yeah, I got stabbed in the chest is, it finally strikes her. Oh, not only did I die twice, I died twice in the same way, right? Just like the physical pain, the remembrance of the pain, it should shoot through her. This should be something we finally tie the knot on, that yes, the pain Teal had been feeling in her chest throughout the story was this. It was this moment, and the reason she kept feeling pain is because she had a hole in her chest. She got stabbed in the heart. Um, and in this moment we can reflect, we can recount her more recent folly rather than the past one. Um, I think it's imperative here, and this is just one final note, that when she's recalling her last moments, her final breath, things should get really muddy. Right now she recalls point for point really what happened, and that's a little silly given that she's recalling from a first person perspective. Were she in that situation and dying, her consciousness would be fading out, and she wouldn't be completely aware of all the things that were transpiring. She would just remember that, like, oh yeah, I was dying. I don't remember exactly what I heard nor what I saw, right? Like she would probably remember the cat guy who runs over, and maybe they say something to her, but she can't really tell, and maybe she said something back, and all she remembers is the taste of iron filling her mouth and the sound of her heart beating slower and the coldness surrounding her. Little things like that. But right now it's just too detailed, it's too precise, and that doesn't make sense if she's recounting her own death. Let's see here. Oh man, we only have 5 pages done, and we are at the 1 hour mark. We are so boned. We are so boned. Let's keep going. Um, so it's nice here that, you know what? I might even skip this one. This is essentially me just saying we need to link the points of her remembering of her past a little more gracefully. Um, she really just goes from thinking about how she died to something else without any transition, and it's causing a bit of whiplash. So I need to be more careful about that in the future. Um, this next point is me offering an idea that perhaps we present Teal's critical self, the one who is chastising herself, and the self that's narrating in different texts, right? We've been kind of batting around this idea of having different fonts for different aspects, especially different characters. And I wonder here if maybe we should present, the more critical Teal as a different character, so to speak. I really need like a little costume that's me doing air quotes. It doesn't come across very well in my voice, I think. But that's neither here nor there. I think this would ultimately be clear for readers, and allowing them to interpret that this is another side of Teal, that, Teal is a being who has multiple sides to them. And one, a big side of Teal is her critical self, is the fact that she's kind of always her own worst enemy, so to speak. She is always the one who calls out her faults because she has to live with them. So that's an idea. I don't know if we'll really follow through with that. Um, Maybe, and this last part is me just saying maybe we could combine, right? Like maybe we take the Teal font, what has become the Teal font in draft two, and twist it a little bit to make it a little more scathing, to make it a little more sharp, to show that it's Teal. Yes, it's still Teal, but it's kind of a Teal in a different light. Um, that's a lot to handle. Once again, I've said it before, and I'll say it again, that like this is tricky. This is more of a layout issue, and I'm barely capable of like formatting different fonts into a word processor at this point. Whenever I try, it really goes screwy. Having everything at the same font size and being readable in the same spacing is really, really hard. So, as much as I like it, I just don't know how I would implement it right now unless I were to handwrite the entire book, which is absolutely ridiculous. I'm already putting myself through so much pain. I am not writing this book by hand. Thank you. Have a great day. Don't tempt me. I might do it. I might go crazy. I might write this book by hand. Okay? Don't tempt me. If my Patreon gets $1,000 a month, I'll print this book by hand. I ain't got a Patreon. Y'all don't gotta worry about that. So throughout this kind of, we're still going through Teal's recollection, and she has some pretty reasonable and also very crushing viewpoints. But we like as Teal is remembering here, we don't get any of her actions or feelings. We don't get how Teal is interpreting these recollections as they come up. Um, a big aspect of this is the guilt regarding her death. The fact that, and we talk about it right now, she like kind of she reacts to the information, she kind of wallows in it in a sudden that she realizes that like, oh yeah, I died and probably no one I know knows that I'm dead. Probably no one that I lived with or loved has any idea that I died because I died so far away from home. Right? And that should be a really crushing realization. That should be something that strikes Teal and smothers her even further in this layer of misery. Um, yeah, it's really important that we emphasize that Teal doesn't know how long she's been dead, nor she doesn't know if anyone has realized that she died. These are two really important points that we need to expand upon. Um, and it's important because they're parts that Teal needs to kind of like mourn. Um, these are essentially like the cores of her grief. Um, and in essence, they are the core of her grief because she failed, right? And that's kind of the big thing. Teal failed. Teal did not live well. Teal died kind of a moron, and that's what's really disheartening and really despairing for her. The other aspect is like, yes, not only did I die, but no one I love knows that I died, and they don't know where I died, nor do they know how I died. Um, and that's just tearing Teal up on the inside. Um, I think this is probably where we get to this crushing low point, and I think this is where Teal should transition into thinking about happier things, right? Thinking about different parts of her life, more the nostalgic things and the familiar things, rather than the terribly depressing things. Um, right? We should almost have like a roller coaster, right? She's gone down, she comes up a bit, but then she inevitably crashes back down once she starts to realize that like she'll never see her loved ones again. She is dead. She is dead twice, and she's never gonna see the Swain. She's never gonna see her family. She's never going to experience any of the things she's fond of ever again. That's all just all gone. Um, and I think just tying in this idea that like, yeah, maybe there was a chance. Maybe the bell tower really did do something, but she effed it up, you know? She effed up her first life, she effed up her second chance, and there's no hope for her anymore. And that's really the low point we need to reach. We need to reach this low point that Teal cements within herself that things are hopeless, that there's no more she can do, that she screwed up so bad that she screwed up twice, and there's nothing else she can do. Which isn't great to say out loud, but that's just how Teal really be going through it right now. So throughout this, there's a lot of Teal with regards to her family. I'm kind of just weighing here if it's like too much. But the big thing right now is I don't think there's going to be a chance to talk about her family within this book outside of this point, right? Outside of Teal sitting down and reconciling with her memories and the fact that her past is no longer valuable in a weird way, and no longer like she will not exist in that. It is her past, right? It's not just a past in like the, oh, when I was younger. It is, that was my life and now I'm dead. It is her past. Her life is her past, right? um and I don't think there's ever going to be a chance other than right now when she's reconciling with this, for her to think about it. And I think if we skip over this, if we skip over talking about her family, then a lot of what comes next isn't going to be very grounded. And something I'm spitballing here is like, okay, well, maybe we could intertwine some of her familial past into what I'm affectionately calling Teal's second run, which is essentially chapter 39. Um, we can really, because that part of the book really gives us an opportunity for Teal's memories to flourish as she goes through things and remembers stuff, right? We don't have to have it all come up here. And then that makes this section much less of an info dump. And I'm really not in support of having an info dump here. I don't love it. Um, we come to we come to the issue though of like, how do we exemplify that Teal is wallowing in this moment? How do we show that she is racked by sorrow? uh, uh, it's so important that we give her what she's attached to, so that her agony right now is so much more important because she doesn't have it. She will never have it again, right? We're talking about her family. Teal's remembering her family fondly, and then it crashes down on her that yes, those are your loved ones, and you do remember them now, and you're never going to see them ever again, right? I don't know how to pitch this without. How do we build up her family, right? How do we build up Teal's fast and give her these high moments that come slamming back down without giving her them in the first place? I don't know. I don't think we can leave it entirely for the second run. I don't think that'll work. I think it'll be too little, too late. But I'm worried right now here the pacing is kind of sticky. It slows everything down. It doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel natural for her to be thinking about one thing with such weight when there's so much stirring around within her. Um, so, all in all, I don't have a great answer. I know it's a flaw, but how do I fix it? I'm not sure. Um, with regards to that, the stitching between her family members feels pretty thin overall. Some of the language, some of how we describe Azure in Indigo is just really inelegant. Once again, a lot of this passage just feels forced. It feels like it's there just because we need to claw Teal back down into misery. Uh, is this the best way to go about it? I don't know. Now that I'm saying this all out loud, I don't know. I don't know if these are the answers. I don't know if we maybe should just skim over her family, but even saying that out loud feels scummy and terrible. Such a big part of Teal's story is her family. And to just bin the memories of her family, just like we're skipping out on so much of what makes Teal Teal by not giving readers the information that is so inherent to who she is, right? Teal's upbringing, Teal's life, Teal's like weird half breed bloodline is such a big part of who she is. Her sisters, her father, her mother, and like the relationship between her various half sisters is all super super important to who Teal is. And so to just skim over it, I don't think we can get away with that. But in the same vein, it does feel kind of forced to just jam it in here and be like, yep, okay, this is the part where we talk about Teal's family, and we're doing it now because I don't have anywhere else to talk about it. Um, there's some like weird Lovecraft going on in here. And I guess the reason I have this note in here is because the writing stops feeling like it's Teal who's narrating, and that's really bad. Um, yeah, we start talking about Azure some more, and the notes here are mostly like, I don't know if that's correct. I don't know if the way we go about this is right. I don't know if the way we talk about Azure is proper. Um, and not in like the sense of, oh, it's maybe a little crass, more in the sense of like, I don't think what we're revealing to the readers right now is inherently important. I don't think, if we're going to talk more about Azure, then we should talk more about Azure. In Teal's book right now, in Teal's memories, I don't think that's where we should be talking so much in this regard about Azure. Um, yeah, I don't know if this is the right direction right now. These are definitely things about these characters that are valid and necessary, but these might be things for a different book. Um, the things about Indigo are a little less awkward. I don't really have a great reason as to why, but um, I think Teal's tone of envy here really, really makes her a little more believable. Um, these are just some aspects of like, right? Teal considers that Indigo probably should have, of the two, of like between Indigo and Azure, Indigo probably would have made the better wizard as far as Teal's concerned, because because Indigo has more of an intellectual aptitude. Um, we use this idea that Indigo isn't attuned to magic, but it should be more that she really doesn't have the knack for it, so to speak. Um, Magic just really isn't something Indigo got into, and it just never appealed to her. But right now we just flippantly say like, oh yeah, Indigo wasn't attuned with magic, which doesn't really make any sense. Um, and I'm saying this part because it's kind of an important note that we say this. We say that Indigo wasn't, didn't have the aptitude, didn't have a knack for magic because of Teal, because her elder sister was invested in it. The fact that Teal, her elder sister, was into it was really what drove Indigo away from it. Indigo kind of resents the study of magic to a degree because, and this is maybe something we could say, maybe something not, maybe this is just deep lore that'll stay in this recording for forever. But um, Indigo might view magic as kind of something that ripped her family apart, that tore her elder sister away from her, and kind of like drove a wedge between Azure and Indigo, because like no, the bridge that was Teal keeping all of the half elves, half sisters together, just disappeared. It was just gone, and that was all magic's fault. Like if Teal didn't learn magic, then none of this would have happened. Then they would have been a happy family. Um, yeah, Indigo might harbor these resentful feelings, these sort of malicious toxicity towards the institution of magic, or taking her elder sister away from her. There's a shift in topics here, and it's clever, but like the presentation is kind of stiff, right? I think we get out of talking about her family. Um, I'm trying to scroll forward for where we are in the story here. I've definitely fallen behind. Yep, there's Azure. There's Indigo. There's me going to magic school. I think that's kind of where we're getting here. Um, yeah, once again, we just fall into a section that doesn't feel like it's Teal narrating, and that's dumb. There should be a colloquial tone. There should be this aspect that Teal is telling a story, right? That Teal is both sitting there wallowing in grief, but she's also informing the readers kind of at the same time. And this is where we get into like the weird detached mind thing, right? We're not outright saying it, but like, how is Teal telling a story if she's really racked by grief and dread and guilt and remorse? But yeah, it feels stiff. It feels clunky. And it's tricky because it's not necessarily my authorial voice. It's not my narrative voice. It's me writing through the lens of Teal. And it's Teal who is expounding this narration. So not only do I have to write it from that perspective, I have to make it believable, because it is Teal who, throughout this, is the one who's telling the readers. So Teal starts talking about how she was shipped off to magic school, and there should be a lot more spite from her. Um, because like no matter how she looks at it, despite the opportunities it afforded her, despite how much she loves magic, she can never really get over the fact that as a 10-year-old she was shipped off to like a boarding school, and she will just forever resent that. She feels like that's something no 10-year-old should have to go through. um Overall, there should kind of be like a through line that Teal suspects sending her off to magic school was one of his many ploys. Um, Part of that is like, okay, maybe, like as she got older, why did she never apprentice? Why did no one ever, no one locally in the elven homeland, why did her father not try to get her apprenticed by somebody? Why did she not take up a craft, a magical craft within her town, within her country, right? Why was it that her father insisted on sending her to a magic school on a different continent? Sure, it was for, like to get her the best education possible, and it was a very illustrious education, but like, why is there all of this weird uh, dodging the bullet? Why is there so much beating around the bush here? It doesn't make sense to Teal. I mean, it does make sense to Teal because she's kind of reasoned it out, but there's always an air of suspicion regarding these things. Um, and maybe this is even, like she might be putting it together presently. This might be her piecing things together right now, that like when she considers things from this point of view, everything just starts to fit together too well. You know, what better way would there be to rid the household of like a terrible half-blood daughter who has no real prospects and probably won't ever get married to a good family? Well, I'll ship her out to a really good boarding school. She'll get a great education, she'll be away from home, and she'll be doing great magic things, and with any luck she'll come back and she'll maybe like have some sort of credibility. She'll have some face that the family can finally stand to keep her around, because maybe she'll be valuable to society. Maybe she'll get a court position with any luck, right? Um, Yada yada yada. These last points are about Azure and Indigo. We don't need to talk about them right now. So a lot of what we start talking about in the memories are good at their core. Linking them the way they're linked right now is smart, but something really bothers me about all of Teal's reminiscing, and I can't really pin it down, unfortunately. Um, I think all in all, I think this segment especially needs some polish. I think it's a draft 2 issue, but I don't know. I don't know. Something about it doesn't vibe with me, and maybe it's just the general air of Teal reminiscing too much, right? Maybe it's just too much at once. Like I said about her thinking about her family. Maybe there's just too many memories in here. Maybe it really takes away from the impact of what's going on right now. But like, there's no one thing I think is wrong. I think this just needs to be tied together and polished and tightened, and hopefully it all works out. Otherwise, maybe ripping things out is the solution. Maybe tethering things back to Teal's present state, back to her sorrow and misery is how we should do it. I don't know. I don't have an answer. Um, this is kind of a tangential thing. I think it might be good to have Teal momentarily pine for the physical establishment of her school, right? Teal went to this magical school called Tabula Rasa, and I think a big part of her longing for um, her past would involve the physical space, the building itself, how it felt to be within the corridors of Tabula Rasa. There's so much to play with like the longing for structures that people have existed in, right? They're such an integral part of memory that links people to where they exist, to where they've been, to places they've learned or perhaps lived at, friends' houses, schools, places of worship, parks, beaches, vistas, right? You name it. People are inherently tied to places that they occupied, and if they felt any sort of attachment to those places, the longing for it, the severing of the ability to go to that place, right, is always kind of damning, is always kind of a condemnation. For example, the thing that comes to my mind right off the top is maybe a childhood home, maybe your friend's childhood home, and then later on in your adulthood, you realize, oh, okay, well, the friend's family doesn't live there anymore, and the new family who owns that house has completely renovated. And there's no chance you will ever get to exist in that space, right? You will never see those walls. You will never see those staircases. You will never see the sofas or the fireplace. Understand, like even just the layout, the island counter in the kitchen won't be there anymore. The fridge won't be there. The sink won't be under the front window, right? Maybe the closets won't be on the one side of the vestibule. Maybe there won't be a laundry room at the end of the hall before you turn right into the dining area, right? Like these are just dumb little things that I'm rattling off the top of my head, but there is a very deep connection between people and the spaces that they have occupied. And it's just something that kind of falls by the wayside here. I never mention it, and that's kind of stupid, right? Teal throughout the whole book has been really invested in architecture and the layout and the design of places and spaces. And for her to not inherently like really miss Tabula Rasa because she was there, because she spent so much of her life there, is just such a missed beat. It's so silly to me that I just never mentioned it. So definitely in draft two, something I need to fix. Teal needs to long for the establishment of her magic academy, and like probably even the buildings she grew up in, the buildings, the aspects, the places she lived as a child. Um, and just overall, this is a good way that we can link her pining with her anguish by reminding readers, like, yes, she will never be there again. Those places are probably different now than they were later. Teal's childhood home is probably completely different, and she will never be able to be in it again. She will never be able to sleep in her own bed. Little things like that. Teal might remember, I don't know, I'm just keeping on the vibe here. Teal might remember the sheets on the bed the last time she slept in it, and like she will never sleep under those sheets ever again. She will never sleep on that pillow. Uh, maybe Teal just has a beat where she remembers the layout of her bedroom or something, right? Just something to really uh, uh, make it incredibly bitter that yes, Teal has all these fond memories now. Teal can remember every little thing, but that's kind of the agony of it. Teal remembers all these things, and she's never going to have them ever again. Um, there's a transition here. There's a shift where we start talking about Teal's fifth year in school, and it's really weak. I like that we start talking about that, but it's too flimsy. It doesn't hold up at all. Um, that's the big point here. We need to have stronger transitions, and I'm just gonna leave it at that. There's some Hansa, or there's some Pinyin in here, and it should just be in Hansa. That's a no for me. Um, there's an important thing here where we start talking about this relationship Teal was in with a girl in her fifth year of school, and I just kind of want to gloss over this quickly by saying, um, even as Teal recollects it, it should be something that she understands with that at the time she was content with. But now, as she looks at it through this hindsight, she is like clearly really bitter about what happened, right? Teal went through her schooling years just kind of like putting up with it, but now that she thinks about it, the outcome, the way the relationship went, Teal is really like festering with this anger and this anguish that like, no, I was pretty mistreated, that like things did not end amicably. I was very distraught, even though I like rebounded pretty well. I'm upset that that happened. I'm upset that I gave my love openly to another individual and it was not reciprocated. Um, and we kind of need this bitterness. We kind of need this resentment so that as we reveal shortly after this blossoming relationship with the Swain, who I can now call Caspian because we're into the part where she mentions his name, where she name drops the Swain's name is actually Caspian. Um, we want to do this. We want to paint Teal's relationship with this Gissa as being nasty, as being kind of like dirty. Not because it was a lesbian relationship, of course, just because Teal was kind of mistreated, and it was kind of like a passing fancy for one half of the relationship, where Teal kind of saw herself as being in love, and it's pretty evident that the other party did not. And we want to show that, so that once we get to Teal talking or thinking about Caspian, rather, um, it's evident, right? The juxtaposition is right there, that like clearly Caspian is head over heels for Teal. Teal was maybe standoffish at first, but as she, and this is something we should take away, right? As Teal is talking more and more about Caspian, we should understand that, yeah, Teal is stupid in love with Caspian. Teal probably was thinking, and she has she basically she got engaged to him, right? Teal made a promise to stay faithful to Caspian. She was invested in a life with him, and I want that to come across like right up front. And I think a good way of doing that is juxtaposing these two relationships. Um, I think in doing that too, right? And we're getting into the Caspian part here, and God, we're only on page 9. I'm so fucked. Um, we really need to bring to the forefront this idea that at first Teal was pretty contemptuous of Caspian, and once again, I want to do that to show that later on, as Teal spent time with Caspian, as Caspian kind of revealed that he had feelings for Teal, that by that point Teal had grown pretty fond of them. Teal had like developed this deep affection for Caspian. Um, we kind of want to present this idea that Teal understands, and we never outright want to say it, but Teal understands that she was such a jerk to Caspian when they first met. Um, and despite it all, and this is kind of the big thing, despite how rude Teal was to Caspian when they first started talking, Caspian still went through all of this effort to like sit beside her every day, to talk to her, to tease her, to be friendly with her, just because he had like a vague hunch that she was maybe sad, that she was kind of going through it a little bit. And once again, I never want to say it outright, but Teal should definitely have this, and not, I don't want to say a realization. This is probably something she's thought about a lot before. Um, that, essentially Caspian did a lot of work out front. Caspian really showed up to sort of help Teal get through the a low in her life, right? Yeah, I don't know. Maybe she thinks something along the lines of like, I don't know how that, I don't know how I would have gotten through that breakup without Caspian being there when he was, so to speak. Um, there should just be like more warmth when Teal recalls aspects of Caspian. Once again, without outright without outright saying it, we need to make it very apparent to readers that Teal is very deeply in love with him. Um, Teal has some memories here. She starts thinking about Caspian and some of their time together, and I think just an important addition to that is we should include some more physical mannerisms that Teal remembers. Um, just to heighten the sense that Teal remembers him fondly, that Teal remembers him in such a an affectionate way that she recalls very little things, very minor things, such as just like the way he walks, or the way he would scratch his ear. I don't know. I'm riffing off the top of my head right now, but yeah, just an important note. Just something that's kind of missing right now. Um, and in a way, I'm trying to reflect, right? Because she's talking right now about how their friendship was blossoming before they really got into a relationship. And I want it to be apparent now that Teal is looking back, once again in hindsight, that these are aspects of him that she adores. Little things about him, little things that he does that she finds fascinating or intriguing or charming. And it's only now that she's kind of removed from the situation that she's it's really dawning on her, like, oh yeah, I really did like how he would always kind of fiddle with his buttons whenever he was nervous or something like that, or he would always straighten his vest, or the way he would kind of lean in and try to read whatever I was working on, right? I don't know, dumb stuff like that. uh Oh, I do have some examples here. I didn't read a single one of them, but just that idea, right? That Teal has this very evident fondness towards Caspian. Um, yeah, you keep telling yourself that, Robin. You keep telling yourself that. So something really important we failed to mention rather, is Caspian's origin. And it's actually kind of a big deal that we just gloss over. And I definitely need to rectify this in draft two. Part of the reason Teal gets really attached to Caspian is because in this boarding school, in this place she's been sent to, like of the three people, right? It ends up there's three people here from the same continent. There's an elf, which we low key met in like chapter 30. And then there's Caspian, right? And then there's Teal, right? Those are the three. And of the other one, who clearly she doesn't get along with, something that really excites her is that she knows that Caspian is from the same continent, and there's a really strong cultural connection between the two. Um, and so it isn't that Teal is initially like, oh, it's one of the cat folk. Okay, um, maybe I'll buddy up with them. Her initial reaction to Caspian should definitely be the same, cold indifference. But as they get to know one another, there should be this overlapping of cultures. I don't want to say a sharing of cultures, right? That they're two distinct societies. But they would have similarities. They would have things that, like, aspects of their cultures that overlap in ways that Teal just can't connect to with the human students at her school. Um, Once again, I don't have any examples, but I'm thinking of stuff like food or music, right? Or certain landscapes, certain physical features of the land where, both of them might really like traveling through such and such forest, or um, they might laugh about how rough the seas are in the north, right? Stuff like that. And it's this shared sense of otherness that helps break down the barriers, right? Because obviously Caspian is a Catman and Teal is a half elf. So they're, like I said, it's not as though they're from the same place. They're not from the same city. They're not both half elves. There is still a pretty big divide between their cultures and their races. But something that helps bridge that gap is the fact that, yes, they are from the same continent. There is a bit of shared culture between them. And especially since they're both students they're both people removed from that culture, from that continent, and placed into isolation, essentially, where they are both considered others. That kind of ties them together. There's a shared camaraderie there, that they are, they're kind of stuck in this together, so to speak. And just another little thing, I think Caspian's mannerism should better reflect his own culture. Um, Teal might find that he speaks similarly, that his common kind of shares a cadence with hers, this like second language common. Um, that when Teal talks about certain elvish things, that Caspian's like, oh yeah, no, I kind of know about that. We have, like, I don't know, maybe if they're talking about a festival or something, like an elvish festival, Caspian might go, oh yeah, we have a similar thing, but we celebrate it at a different time of year. And when we do it, we make these dishes, and we actually do this kind of ceremony where we burn these things. We burn like these effigies to celebrate the whatever, until, would be kind of like, oh, that's crazy. Well, when we do it, we light this incense and we pray to these people, and we do it by this river, because the way back when, in this story, this river was important because, this is a river where the goddess came down, and, yada 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 yada. Um, so at the same time, they are, like I said, very distinct cultures, very much their own people, but there is an overlap. And I think this overlap is what's missing right now. We never talk about where Caspian's from or how their culture is, and we don't have to dive super into it, but we do need to make it apparent that when their relationship was blossoming, when the two were fostering just a friendship, when they were kind of just developing propinquity with one another, there was certainly this shared culture, this cultural overlap that helped them get along, that helped ease Teal into um, I don't want to outright say a relationship like yeah, all relationships are kind of relationships, right? Knowing another person is a relationship, but I'll stick with relationship, right? Like ease her into a relationship before it became a romance, right? That's what I'm trying to say. And right now, none of this is here, and that's really unfortunate. And I'm just going to keep going. Um, Teal dwells on her love for Caspian for a long time, and I think that's fine. Um, there might be a better way to inject it a little more love into her recollections. Well, this is kind of another instance where she's a little too factual with her affections towards Caspian, and they end up feeling a little cold. Like I've said earlier, it should just be really apparent that Teal is just head over heels. Teal is really in love with Caspian and regrets, not just regrets, but like truly agonizes this idea that she, quote unquote, betrayed him. That Teal made this promise to Caspian to be with him, that she wanted to live her life with him. And that is no longer something she can do. It is impossible for her because she died. And not only did she die, she screwed up her chance to maybe come back. And that's just out the window, right? So that would eat away at a girl. That kind of kills the mood a little bit. So that's an important thing that's kind of missing. Um, there's kind of this fun idea that Teal realizes once again in hindsight that she was dating Caspian. That she like I don't know. Despite her wallowing, I think we can still have ups and downs, right? We can still live through Teal's past and appreciate good moments when they happen, and kind of poke fun at silly things where Teal is like, oh wait, I guess we were dating, weren't we? It never really felt like that at the time. Um, this is just something maybe we'll play up a little more in the future. Um, and just on that note, I'm kind of beating the same drum again. Maybe it's a different drum in the same set, but we should be emphasizing this idea that at some point in Teal's past, it just started to feel like Caspian was part of her life. Caspian was always an aspect of her life that she just always wanted around. It was never as though there was an official, let's go out, let's start dating. It was just kind of like, oh, you're around all the time and I like it when you're around, so I guess I'll just keep you around. And at some point it transitioned into like, oh, well, yeah, I guess because you're around all the time, I feel a lot more comfortable around you than other individuals. So yes, I will allow you to sit close to me. I will allow you to tell me silly things that are maybe inappropriate, right? But there should always be this detached idea of like, oh, wait, yeah, I guess we were dating. Yeah, weird. It never felt like we started dating, but I guess it just happened. I guess Caspian kind of just wore me down until he was just around all the time and I really liked him, right? Which is maybe a little toxic now that I'm saying that out loud, maybe toxic, but I don't know, right? Caspian never had any ill intent towards Teal, so there's that. I don't know, maybe something to keep in check for the future. Um, We never mentioned that the Caspian and Teal probably traveled together. That's a little silly thing that's missing. They probably would have been on a ship together. They probably would have been in a carriage together. Um, Teal probably would have made a very important, like, an intentional effort to depart with Caspian in a kind of a secluded manner, right? Almost like a secret manner, because she knows she shouldn't be dating a cat guy. She shouldn't be with a cat guy because her family would frown upon that. Um, this is me just kind of like detailing how the trip would work, but that's an important aspect to the relationship that's missing in the book right now. The fact that they would likely have traveled together after developing their relationship with one another. So we shift from past to present. Teal's desperately trying to stave off her hopelessness by reliving her ups and downs, right? That's kind of what we're going through right now. Um, I think it's important that we maybe incorporate a little more dread. We've sort of fallen off by this point in the book with the idea that there are these ever-present rattling of chains going on beyond the confines of Teal's prison. Um, maybe Teal even really goes through it right now. Maybe she thinks the space around her, this elevator, is kind of shrinking. Maybe she starts to dwell on the pain in her chest, or Maybe she's starting to realize just like how numb she is, right? How she's unable to feel the pain in her chest. Wasn't that there earlier? Shouldn't I feel cold? Shouldn't I feel anything? Um, we're missing some mania. Is essentially where I'm going with this. We're missing some mania because Teal coming out of her memories should be sort of a reminder that like, oh yeah, everything I'm kind of going through right now is a hopeless mess. Um, I don't know. I might be kind of keen here to allow Teal to ruminate and sort of stew on how she was manipulated. Um, and when I say manipulated, I mean manipulated by tabula rasa. Another aspect that's kind of missing. I think we low key mention it. We have Teal mentioned that she was kind of suspicious. Um, yeah, because she was sent out. She was hoping to collect this artifact for her school to prove herself. But she starts thinking, well, wait a minute. Why was it that way? Why was it that this was the case? And she doesn't really pause to think those things through right now, and that's something that's missing. Do 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 do. Deals a moment here where she thinks about her attire. And I think we can kind of push this and also incorporate the fact that she's wearing less attire in the second draft. She would probably take a moment here to really realize that, to chastise herself for being so vain. She probably feels a little defiled, right? She might, if this is the case, feel as though the warden stripped her, that they removed parts of her habiliments from herself, of her accoutrement. Um, and she might go through the logic of being like, okay, well, if they wanted my amulet, then why did they, because in Teal's mind, the only thing that somebody would probably steal off of her would be her dagger and her amulet. The rest of her clothing are kind of like whatever, and they were pretty scuffed up to boot. But she might go through some logic and come to the point of, well, if they wanted my amulet, why did they take everything? Why am I just here in my skirt and a dress shirt and my leggings? That's a little silly. Um, yeah, and she would, it would be starting to dawn on her. Why isn't my shirt drenched? Where's the blood? Shouldn't I be covered in blood? What happened? Shouldn't there be holes in my garments? Um, and it should really be by this time, Teal's really been clinging to this idea that the warden has her trapped somewhere, but it should start to erode that, and kind of dawn on Teal that, oh, maybe not. Maybe this isn't the case. Things aren't adding up here, right? I sort of mentioned it earlier, but this is where things should really start crashing down on Teal. Um, so this is another thing that really deserves a little more depth is we never really talk about it. We do talk about it a little bit, right? There's like a paragraph or two here. Honestly, I think it's just one where a large aspect of why Teal feels really guilty for like quote unquote betraying Caspian is because she convinced him to stay. Caspian expressed a desire to want to go with Teal on this assignment, but Teal was dogged and stubborn and very insistent that Caspian stay and finish his studies at Tabula Rasa. And it's just something we don't touch upon. I mean, we touch upon it, but we don't dig into it, I guess is what I'm saying. Um, and we don't delve into the nuance of it, I think is the problem. Not only does Teal want him to stay there to finish his studies, right? She wants him to complete his course because she's kind of in a position where she can leave because she screwed up, but she doesn't want him to screw up on his examinations like she did. But there should be a hidden layer here of Teal. The real reason she wants him to stay is because she wants to keep him safe. She knows she's leaving to do something that's maybe a little dangerous, that maybe involves um, putting herself in the line of fire. Right? She's going out looking for this artifact that may or may not exist, and she's kind of heading towards a less developed area. And she doesn't want Caspian to get hurt. She wants to make sure he is safe and finishes schooling. Um, Almost this idea of like, if something were to happen to you, Caspian, right? And this is from Teal's perspective. If something were to happen to you, I don't know if I could live with myself. I don't know if I could keep on living if something were to happen to Caspian, is essentially what Teal is thinking. But we don't talk about it any at all. We don't mention it one little bit, and that's a little silly. Also, what we don't mention is how thirsty I am, so I'm going to take a little drink of water. Oh man, H2O. That shit's good. Let's keep going. We're flying along. Let's keep going. So yeah, we finally get to the point where Teal starts to descend into this kind of hysterical sorrow. And I think it should be a lot more gut wrenching, a lot of a really slow realization for Teal. Right now, she falls a little too fast, and I think she should really kind of linger on the details of her death. Um, have them they should really become muddied as she struggles with wanting to recall but not wanting to relive, right? She should be at this kind of this point of opposition with herself. We can kind of use that as a spark to morph her sorrow into this sort of awful depression that she's essentially descending into, that she's falling into. um, she should really stumble step after step, one realization after another, as she comes to terms with what really happened, with how her demise really went. Right. Um, yeah, that like all of these things really come crashing down on Teal. That she not only has abandoned and departed her loved ones who are still alive, but that she is trapped here, right? She is imprisoned here. She is forlorn and alone. I guess I could just portmanteau those two. Um, and we really need this all to culminate into this sense of pain and agony that is way, way worse than getting impaled through the chest by a spike. Uh, you know, essentially, I boil it down into these two notes, right? Teal's never going to see Caspian again. She's never going to see her loved ones ever again. She's never going to be loved, and she's never going to feel love. All Teal has now, after her multiple deaths, all she has is grief, and it's all her fault. And that's just kind of what we really need to get to here. Um, yeah. So do I need to go over this? I don't think I do. Teal utters an apology here. I think I can save a page of notes here. Teal utters an apology here, and I just have a little back and forth with myself in my notes here on whether or not it should be in Elvish or if it should be in Common. And I think I kind of come upon the crux that like maybe it's both. It's probably both, right? Because Teal is expressing an apology to Caspian in a sense, right? She is apologizing outward, so I don't think it would be entirely in Elvish. However, I think her initial utterance would be kind of more of an internal, right? More of a an intuitive outcry, right? The first part is kind of an interjection, whereas the rest of her apology is something she is sort of saying in mourning. She is saying in grief. So probably both. There's very little acting here. That's unfortunate. Um, she should, yeah, if she's apologizing, if she's really going through the grief and the agony of the scene, she should probably be clutching at the ring, maybe like bent over, stooped over, head on the ground sort of thing, right? Just really going through it. Um, the only thing right now that Teal actually has in this present moment is her ring, right? That's the last thing she has of anything. And all it is right now really is just a reminder of how much she's screwed up. So Teal's not acting very much, and that's not good. Um, so there's this idea, right? Immediately following this apology, this kind of outcry, there's this idea that Teal laid there and kind of cried for a long time. But I think what we should do is really build up this idea that Teal cried for basically an eternity. Um, it wasn't until, the way it should be framed is that it wasn't until Teal emptied herself completely, until there was nothing left, until she completely lacked any perception of time. Um, there's really only one thing, right? There's really only one thing that's keeping Teal grounded to like the perception of the passing of time, and that would be the rattling of the chains outside. And outside of that, she really has no concept of how long she's been here. And like I don't have a one-to-one example of how we're going to do this, but I think it would be much more poignant if we paint this scene, if we suggest that yes, no, Teal's just stuck in this elevator forever, and during that forever she's basically just been crying until she cannot cry anymore. The woe just like rinses her, it just squeezes all of her sorrow out of her. As we go forward here, there's some inconsistency with verb tenses. It's important that I remain consistent. This is me just reminding myself, like, yeah, be careful. First person present only can it can really only be first person past if Teal is talking in the past. But we have to be careful with that, right? If Teal is talking about the present, then it is in the present. If Teal's talking about the past, then it is in the past. But there's some weird overlap there. Um, where is it? Where is it? There's a brief mention here of Lacrimosa, and like that's good. I like that we mention Lacrimosa, but it feels really token. The feelings throughout here are all really correct, but given how we've altered the text earlier, this might just be kind of like a tiresome rereading if we include something like this in draft two. Um, if we're going to include a eulogy for Lacrimosa, it should be much more heartfelt. It should be something that Teal really expounds, that Teal has a moment of mourning for Lacrimosa, right? Ironically, Teal has a tearful mourning or moment of mourning for Lacrimosa. I botched my own joke there because I'm trying to correct the fact that I put another freaking 3 in my notes. So yeah, there should just be more of an emotional beat for Lacrimosa instead of a kind of a token inclusion. Um, there's kind of an artistic quality here with spacing and this poem and letting it exist in space, and I think it's really lovely the ideas that I have here of having like a poem on its own blank page and then uh, um, kind of emphasizing it with this onomatopoeia on the next page with the to signify that the door, the elevator has finally stopped and the door is opening. Um, I kind of at this point, right? I have a suspicion that we haven't really given Teal enough time to grieve, though, especially for her family. And maybe it's kind of just because we mentioned them so long ago that it seems that Teal's only regret is that she didn't get to love Caspian, right? We spent so long talking about Caspian and how Teal misses Caspian that some of the other aspects of her past, of her grieving, of her remorse don't land very well because we spent so long talking about how much she loves Caspian. And like, I can't stress enough how much Teal loves and pines for Caspian, but her family and her other loved ones and her life at large shouldn't go by the wayside just because she loves Caspian so much. Um, it needs to be balanced. Essentially, we need to find a balance here, and there isn't a balance right now, and that's because of it. It makes Teal kind of petty. It makes Teal seem as though she didn't actually love her family, which is kind of the first thing that came to mind, and that's incorrect. That is not how Teal is thinking. Um, yeah, and the last bit of this is me just kind of arguing. I don't know if we need more or if we just kind of need to emphasize what we mention of the family and of Caspian. Um, I don't know if we need to tack on more about her family here per se. I think we just need to have what Teal considers about her family and what Teal considers about Caspian to have equal mass, right? They need to balance each other on a scale. Um, so Teal steps out of the elevator and there's just nothing. And that's great. I love the nothing. I love the void. I live here in the void. So that's, kind of a bias. I kind of got a void bias, I'll be honest with you. But I think we need to do a better job conveying the sinister nothingness of the space, right? I can definitely vouch for the fact that the void is expansive and threatening and demoralizing, uh, kind of like kind of like the United States of America in 2025. But uh, I will not see myself out. I am in the void. I am stuck here. So y'all can see yourself out if you don't like my jokes. Um, but yeah, there's not really a very good sinister air to the nothingness uh, uh, that crops up. Right? I don't know if maybe this is because we have Teal do something silly like lie down in the void, but there should be more of a cold. I don't want to keep using the word sinister, but it really fits so well here. It's just uncaring, right? It's expansive, it's endless, it's uncaring. It is, it's just there, and it's always there forever. Um, we kind of missed the ball too. We missed the mark a little bit by suggesting that Teal leans back and just lies down. That kind of suggests that there's a gravity to the space, but it isn't quite right. Right? She doesn't fall into the supine position. She kind of just brings herself into one. She kind of just like motions her body to lie down, right? There's no gravity here. There is nothing. It is just Teal existing in an infinite gray. Um, and to reinforce that, Teal might even reason to herself that there is no difference between standing and lying. It's just she's just standing horizontally now, right? Standing is just vertical lying down. There is no difference for Teal. There is no difference in the nothing because there's no gravity, there's no surfaces, there's no anything. Um, I think it's just important that we do have Teal lie down because she is essentially surrendering. She is submitting to the situation. Something about lying down feels right. Um, Once again we get to this idea of there being a more present Teal, and in my summary I called it the Teal of the mind. There is a Teal of the mind who is kind of like the present Teal, and I think it's important that we incorporate a little bit more spite into them. um we really want them to be scathing and actively mean towards what we're going to call, what I have called the body Teal. um and that's basically it. That's all this note says. That the mind Teal should just kind of be like actively a little more nasty, uh, to convey this cynical nature that we were kind of developing earlier. Um, there comes a point where there's nothing, right? And as there's nothing for so long, Teal's mind starts thinking, okay, well, what would happen if I tried to kill myself? Which is a totally rational and perfectly reasonable thing to think about when you're stuck in the void forever. Um, and I don't know, like trigger warning, I guess, right? Content warning. Content warning in the book that involved like murder last chapter, visceral, terrible, bloody murder. But content warning: Teal tries to kill herself, except it doesn't really work, and she's already dead. So I don't think that counts as a suicide warning. But like, whatever, get off my back. I'm not including content warnings in my book. You can all grow the fuck up. Um, I think there should be this idea of Teal trying to feel something, so desperate to feel something that this moment should be much more exhilarating, right? Um, there should be something kind of like frightening, kind of scary, something that Teal is trying to eke out of herself via this route. She is trying to get anything, right? She is already in such a I don't know, maybe it's been a short amount of time, maybe it's been a few hundred millennia. I don't know how long Teal's been stuck in the void, but there should be this greater sense when Teal tries to end herself, of there being a momentary excitement for whatever reason, and then it kind of just resulting in more nothingness, right? Like she should be like, oh yeah, here's a thing, here's something I could try. Wait a minute, this is exciting. And then she tries it, nothing happens, and she just goes, oh, okay, well, what would I have expected? Of course I can't kill myself. I've died twice. That would be ridiculous. Um, all in all, generally here, there needs to be a better sense of timelessness now that Teal is out of the elevator, now that she is just alone. I don't really know how we're going to describe it, but there should just be an endless, continuous passage of time that is all the same, completely irrelevant to Teal. I've got like a little example of what you would be talking about to reinforce that idea, but I don't want to recite it right now. I'm running out of time. We're already over 2 hours here, and I got a few pages left, so I'm just gonna speed run. All right, my throat hurts. I could drink some more water, but I don't want to. I want these notes on. We're on page 16 of 22. All right, I got to rapid fire this shit. Let's go. Um, Teal in the nothing more. I think allowing the text more space when need be would allow some of these lines to hit home. Oh, okay. So I think here I'm referring to when Teal is kind of berating herself, when she's taking time out of through her current situation in she kind of investigates the nothing, she exists through it, and she's trying to explain to us, the reader, how it feels, right? And I think like this is once again a layout issue. I think giving everything a little bit more space, I think everything should incorporate a little more of a, I don't want to say liminal, but there should be a weight to it, right? There should be a weight, and maybe in an ironic sense, in a weird sense, a weightlessness, that we need to space things out here in order to foster this idea that there is space, that things are endless, that there is a certain loneliness. For example, down here, right, there's this line where Teal thinks to herself, to themselves. She thinks, we were always nothing, I guess. We've just returned. I'm home, nothing. Here I am. Ha. I hate you so much. Right? Having this little section here just spaced out, maybe out throughout the page, right? Like as if she's having a monologue for herself. Maybe even the line "I hate you so much" just exists on its own page, just to reverberate to the reader, like, yes, there is nothing here, and Teal is just lying here in hell, or whatever you want to call it, to or she's just berating herself because that's all she has left. All she has left is this terrible disgust for what she lived through and what ended up happening to her. Um, yeah, just we're trying to visually incorporate this idea that there is disgust, that Teal is wallowing in misery, that there is space and there is infinity. And because of that infinity, Teal feels incredibly lonely. Um, Azure shows up. That's great. Azure shows up. Um, I think overall Azure showing up should just be have like a little bit a little bit more mystique. Um, Something's kind of just missing. Azure really just shows up out of nowhere. Teal opens her eyes. Teal has this moment where she's like, okay, well, I'll just surrender to the infinity. I'll just turn off my mind and stop thinking. Um, and inevitably she opens her eyes again because something doesn't quite feel right. She senses that there's a disturbance around her, and it ends up that Azure is just right there. And I don't hate that, but it just seems a little silly. It just really comes out of left field. Um, she is ultimately right. Azure to Teal right now is the first not nothing in the space. She should really incorporate this like ethereal, dreamy quality. Maybe she's glowing a bit. I don't know. Something to just suggest that there's more to it than Azure just being there. Um, because as it stands right now, yeah, Azure's just there, and it's a little silly. I don't hate it, right? I'm definitely I have a silliness bias, but yeah, just a little weird. It's just a weird that Azure's right there. I see we had another viewer show up. I'm a little late, but hey, thanks for coming. It wasn't just Robin here for once. Just kidding, Robin. I love hanging out with you. I wish we could go back to the good old days when there was like a question period and I had time to talk about things that weren't my 200,000 pages of notes. Um, yeah. What else do we have here? Just little things. There are a lot of little things throughout this segment here when Teal is chatting with Azur. One important thing is that Teal should actively recognize how lifeless her voice sounds when she talks, when she like hears the body talk to Azur. Um, I think it's important that Azur's speech right now. Azur's speech, it doesn't really reflect her upbringing very well, right? There's a line here that she says father in the other elves, but even Azur, right? Azur is kind of like a little disenfranchised from the family. But even at that distance, Teal would refer to the other elves as her elder sisters. There's like no precedence for her to be that removed, for her to be so um what's that called when you like so disowned from her family that she's like, oh yeah, the other elves. um she should definitely have this still like a familial bond. There's a bit here where Teal starts being a little philosophical, and I think that's fine. I think we should maybe even dig into it a little bit more. We're trying to suggest this idea that Teal isn't a total moron. Teal is not a complete dullard, and especially if she's given time and the ability to think and introspect, she can actually come up with some pretty deep and fascinating ideas. Um, she might even have this is just a cool idea. I thought it would be good to clue in on that maybe Teal has a quote from like some sort of fictional philosopher. um, this would be, a really good spot to tie in again, once again, elvish culture, but also to offer at the same time commentary from contemporary Chinese philosophy that would kind of go hand in hand with what Teal's experiencing here. I have a very specific example written down here, but I don't remember it, and I was probably just gonna go like read through this guy's manifesto at a later date, so I just won't get into that right now. So they start bickering, and I like that they're bickering. Right, they kind of have this sisterly moment where they're having a bit of a spat, and where they're making like crude comments at one another, and Teal is being a little scathing, and I kind of like that too. But there's something lacking. I don't know if that's maybe that Teal's commentary needs a little bit more depth or that her focus needs shifting. I don't know, but there's something missing to their tete-a-tete here. Teal is essentially asserting that her life wasn't anything special and she kind of wasted it. And she is trying to convince Azur that she belongs where she is. While Azur, um, oh, sorry, that she belongs where she is, but that she loves Azur and that she wants Azur to move on so that Azur can continue to live her life. Um, yeah, we should just make that a little more apparent. Right now, it's like Teal's a little almost too mean. She's almost standoffish, but I think she can still be standoffish. But if we motivate it correctly, it reads much better. It reads much more sweetly. That she is saying, "Get out of here, Azur. You're like you deserve to live your life to the fullest. You shouldn't be wasting your time mourning for a fool like me." Right, we're trying like Teal's point of view is that Azur shouldn't be here, yes, but Azur shouldn't be here because she should be living her life to the fullest. Right, there's almost like a sense of martyrdom to what Teal is proselytizing here. um Azur kind of plays she plays a little dirty, and she starts, digging into old memories to really try to connect with Teal and to really stir her in a sense. Um, and I think it's good, right? Once again, we have a core element here that should stay. That idea should remain, but I think it's important that throughout all of this, Teal should still sound really cold and aloof, uh, kind of as if, in reflection to what we were saying earlier, where Teal is a little too calculating in her reminiscing, this should be where this cold, factual, like, yes, this happened. Yes, that happened in my past. This is what you know, Azura, you're remembering that wrong. It was actually these things in that building, right? We need to push this idea that she has entered this realm of just complete detachment from her former emotional state. Um, Despite all of that, though, despite her coldness, she is still filling in the blanks. If she were truly ignorant, if she really were detached, she wouldn't even be engaging with Azura right now, right? And it might be on one side, she might be thinking, okay, well, hopefully if I just kind of hasten this apparition, if I just get this ghost to reminisce about whatever they want, maybe it'll dispel. Maybe this is just a spirit here to bother me, and maybe if I deal with them, they'll go away. That might be one aspect of how Teal is presently thinking about it. But like I said, I think the other part is that, yeah, Teal is maybe secretly attached to. Obviously, she's secretly attached. These are her memories, in a sense. These are being told by her half sister, but Teal is involved in a lot of them. And I suppose there's no way out of Teal being kind of linked to them in one aspect or another. Overall, the memories that Azure brings up, they're really sweet, they're really mild, they're really tender. They kind of teeter on saccharine, and unfortunately, that reads as being really out of character for Azure. Um, I hope that this kind of all just needs polish, but as I've been saying with Teal, right, that it's important that we maintain voice with Teal as she is the author presently. Azure as a character doesn't feel like Azure. We need to make sure that what Azure brings up as memories and almost what Azure brings up as stories to Teal feel like they're being told as stories by Azure, right? We're missing this depth of character that should penetrate the like weird layers we're into, right? We're into like a story and a story and a story at this point, and by the time we get to Azure telling Teal about a story in Teal's recollection, right, in Teal's narration, we're so deep, but we need to maintain that yes, Azure is the one telling Teal, who is telling us, the reader, about what she's perceiving in this moment, all while we read it in a book. Who is nested, right? What we're experiencing right now is nested in the framework of the bigger book, which is nested in Teal's, weird reality in the wherever, which is nested within her life, which is, yeah, it's nested all the way down. It's birds all the way down. Everyone, welcome to the flock. But yeah, we just gotta make sure it's Azure who is telling these things, not like a weird mouthpiece. Um, yeah, I don't think I need to go into why that's important. It just is. Um, we never mention it, but there should be an additional note here that Teal is really reluctant to look at Azure. That Teal is, while she's lying there, while the body is lying there, Teal is maintaining this upright gaze, this unblinking stare straight ahead. That like she is putting up an active effort to not look at Azure because she's not only does Azure right now represent an interruption from the nothing, um, Teal just can't bear, right? Teal just can't bear to see her half sister and to reconcile with the remorse of seeing her sister's face right now. So just something we should mention, right? Teal is trying not to look at Azure, and we can dive into that maybe in the text if we want, but I think the subtext hold. Another thing we need to do is to dig a little deeper into this notion that Teal suspects she's having another bout of insanity. We don't really touch on that enough right now, and that's kind of something that's missing. Um, in a way, we're trying to paint this interaction with Azure as something kind of miraculous, right? Why isn't Teal being beset by visions again? Why isn't she being visited by any other? Right? She's got a pretty extended family. She was, pretty enthralled with Caspian. Why is it not Caspian? If she's gone insane, why is it not her lover? Why is it her half sister? Why not her mother? Right? There are other players at play here, other bigger parts of Teal's life. Why is it Azure? Right? Um, Maybe that's something Teal thinks about. Right? Not only the fact that yes, Azure is here, but Teal might think about why aren't the others here? What would I do if Indigo was here? What would I say if my mother was here? Would I be apologizing instead of being kind of standoffish? Would I be crying again? What if Caspian was here professing his love to me? In our final moments together, would I break down in a mess, or would I also tell him to leave and go live his life? Just some things to consider, some things that we could inject into the scene to make it a little more fresh, a little have a bit more weight to these certain aspects that are kind of just fluttering around right now. Um, the way Teal speaks throughout some of this, especially when she's embarrassed, is kind of out of character. Um, I do really like, however, that Azur reciting something of a shameful memory is what finally gets Teal to break. The thing of like all of these nice, pleasant memories, Teal is just like, yeah, okay, whatever, that happened. But by pressing Teal's shame, by pressing Teal somewhere where Azur knows, Azur knows Teal so well that she knows that Teal can't deal with embarrassing situations very well, is both really cute on like a familial bonding level, right? It's a really nice sisterly quality that the two share, and it's just really funny that, yeah, Teal being as vain and kind of as haughty as they are, the embarrassing memory is finally what gets them to break. I love it. It's a nice character nuance. It's crunchy, right? Um, I still think, however, she should try to resist. Right? She should be so steeped in this state of reluctance. Of she's just foregone at this point that even this embarrassing memory should be something she tries to maybe halt or divert. Um, and this is something we can maybe use to drive a wedge between Teal of the mind and Teal of the body. Whereas like Teal of the mind is like, no, like I won't give in to such petty things, and then like Teal of the mind is watching as Teal of the body is like writhing around and groaning and like, no, don't say that, don't, oh no, I'm gonna cover my ears, shut up. um there's an extra note, and I think this is important, even though we're kind of lagging behind here. I think it's important to note that something we need to how do I want to say it? We need to reinforce it by not mentioning it, and that's the fact that Azur mentions Teal's first lover from her fifth year, but Azur never makes any mention of Caspian, and that's important because we need to really subtly hint here that perhaps Teal is keeping her very long and very deep and kind of passionate and uh, you know romantic relationship with this cat man a secret from her entire family. Um, and that goes twofold, right? We're trying to build this idea of character, of familiar relationships, of Teal keeping a secret from her family, but also we want this sting of, you know, realization that even now, right, despite this miraculous occurrence, despite Azur being here, Teal's at this point where she's like, I'm not sure if this is really Azur, but I'm pretty sure I'm not hallucinating, so I'm kind of just taking this with a grain of salt. Um, it should dawn on Teal that like, oh, wait, she mentioned she mentioned Gessa, but not Caspian. That must mean this further reinforces the idea that she never knew about Caspian, that my family never knew about him in our relationship. Um, and yeah, no, this just reinforces further things. The idea that if Azur did know about the relationship, surely she would have brought it up. And also, further reinforcing the idea that whomever Teal is speaking to at this present moment might actually be her sister, but also this subtextual idea that, oh, yeah, wait a minute, my family definitely doesn't know I was dating the cat man. And if I'm dead and they don't know, like the cat man definitely doesn't know that I'm dead. Just a little another thump at the stake in Teal's heart that like, oh, I don't think Caspian knows I died. Um, and we can say this all without saying it, right? That's what I'm trying to get across here. We need to be a little more subtle with it, but we need to reinforce these ideas without outright touching on them. Um, these are just little things regarding Azur and Teal and their memories. Um, this notion that Teal the body and Teal the mind, which in my notes I've referred to as Teal and the corpse, right? Teal of the body is the corpse. Teal of the mind is just Teal. Um, we need to better reinforce this idea that to both of them they're kind of regrettably intertwined. And we need to do that. I'll get more on it in a minute, but we need to leverage this idea in a few beats. But like I said, there should be splits. There should be moments where Teal of the mind is thinking a thing, but the corpse is kind of reacting in a different way. But despite all of that, they are all part of the same being. They are all different aspects of what makes Teal Evergarden Teal Evergarden. Um, yeah, Teal wondering what. Okay, okay. So these are more like pretty hyper specific fixes. Um, just little things like the way Azure speaks kind of lacks some familiarity. How parts of their conversation should be new information for Azure, and she should really react in that way of like, oh, I didn't know that. Certain, yeah, just certain little things. Um, Having Teal kind of wonder more if certain aspects about Azure, things she says, things she doesn't say, things that like the way Azure is talking throughout her reminds Teal briefly about how Azure would talk when she visited the grave of her mother or something. Little things like that. They kind of clue in to Teal that maybe there's more to this than just a weird apparition. Maybe this is actually Azure mourning for Teal. Maybe this is Azure, manifesting grief towards the loss of her half sister. Um, and part and parcel, all of this should really manifest in this doubt that Teal has right now with talking to Azure. That she kind of thinks Azure might be a third part of her, a manic manifestation of her insanity, and it it chips away at her that like how does this third part know these things that I'm not really sure about, or how does it not know things that I definitely know, right? With regards to say Caspian and Teal's relationship, how would if this was just a manifestation of insanity, would it not know that? Would it not be heckling me about that? Little things like that, right? Or like super hyper specific details about their living situation or their home life that Teal had even forgotten about. Teal had maybe repressed that Azure just brings up as like flippant commentary. We start to get this uh, um, sliding towards Teal is sliding towards this culmination that like I think this actually is just Azure. I think by some means this might actually just be Azure kneeling beside me and kind of mourning for me. Um, yeah, this is me just again saying it doesn't feel like this is Azure speaking, and I think that's a big part of why a lot of this feels unnatural. It doesn't feel like it's Azure talking to Teal. It just feels like there's a character talking to Teal. What they bring up is cute. What they bring up is connected to Teal. We paint these lovely little vignettes of their childhood together, but it never outright feels like it's Azure herself speaking to Teal. Right? It never feels like Azure talking to her half sister. It never feels like two sisters kind of having a discussion. And by this point, right? By this point in the narrative, they should be kind of having more of a colloquial, kind of a down to earth conversation. They were kind of teasing one another before, they were bickering before that, but things have calmed down and they're kind of just discussing things on even terms. So they should be very familial, very casual, right? As families often talk to each other. There should be little hints, little gestures, little laughs and pauses, little jokes and gags that creep in. And this is a pretty serious moment, so I don't know if gags and jokes are going to make in here, but I want it to feel like these two are family and they're talking to one another. It just feels like it feels like a novel conversation. It feels like Azure could be another character from like any chapter rather than being Teal's sister. Um, yeah, she's just kind of like too rigid. Bu- 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 bu. So Azura starts to disappear, right? Whatever had manifested here starts to fade away, and they have this heartfelt goodbye, so to speak. A thing here I have written is that it should be described more that Teal clutches at, or sorry, that Azure clutches at Teal's corpse, because she's like kneeling beside her, right? Azure is kneeling beside Teal in this scene. And just the way we describe the physical reactions or interactions between the two should reflect that position of both of them in space. Um, there's this idea that like Teal's unable to move, and yet she clutches at Azure's robes, and there's just absolutely no logic. I don't know why we talk about. I get why we talk about Teal being unable to move. She's racked by emotions and she feels paralyzed, but this is dumb, right? We're talking about two opposing physical traits right here. Just pick a lane. Let's pick a lane. Um, it should be this idea that Teal is panicked, that there is going to be a loss, right? She's going from this. Teal would rather have an annoying reminder of her sister than nothing for the rest of eternity, right? And so there should be a panic. There should be this fear of losing Azure, of Azure disappearing from Teal's side. And it should be this realization, this panic, this worry, this anxiety that spurs Teal into action, into like trying to clutch her sister, into trying to bring her close, into finally like moving from her prone, or is it prone? No, from her supine position. Um, yeah, having Azure there, even if Azure is insanity, is something, and as it's something, it's better than nothing, right? So there's grayness, and then okay, yeah, blah 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 blah. Sorry, I've talked so much, I'm way out of the loop. Um, I think we're about here, right? So Teal descends, right? Azur's gone in kind of this beautiful display of loss, and there's this return of grayness. There's this fade of these golden moths, right? Azur kind of disappears in this ombre of golden moths that evaporate off of her. Hard to describe. Um, we need a bit more beauty there. We need a bit more nuance, a bit more of illustrative uh, um, language to better convey this idea that I have. And it should overall have this kind of like crushing overtone that, you know, oh, I have here very cleverly written that nothing lasts forever, referring to the fact that Azure left, that she did not last forever, that neither Azure nor the moths she kind of transformed into last forever, and only that which is surrounding Teal, the grayness of infinity, is the only thing that does last forever. I thought it was pretty clever for that one. I'm pretty good at writing, don't you know? I'm pretty funny. Um, good gravy. Get off of this page. I ain't never even. Oh, I did click on you, didn't I? I took off that one highlighted part. Click. Where are we? Where the heck are we? Um, nothing lasts forever. Teal is separating. So Teal comes to this point where she's like, I'm just going to let the corpse rest in peace. And I think her separating her from herself it just comes out of nowhere, and it's way too willing. This should be something that Teal of the mind, Teal, just she slowly realizes. This should be something that she comes to throughout introspection and thought. She can still be willing, but it isn't something she brings about with intent, right? It should be something that kind of dawns on her, and she realizes she's slowly separating from the body, and this is just how it's going to be. If she is ever going to rest in peace, she needs to detach herself from her physical state. Um, she should probably have a bit of a thought here that like death is just an extension, another step in the journey of life. Um, And she might even be considering the fact that there might be more, right? There might be more things beyond death. She doesn't know. She doesn't know what's waiting for her. All she knows is that she's done, and she needs to reconcile with that fact. The fact that she died twice, and there's nothing she can do about it. Um, she doesn't have to buy into these ideas, right? Um, but given her malaise, given her current situation, it's something that would dawn on her. It's something that she would probably consider lightly, if nothing else. Um, I think this edition of Teal considering like what even is a self, what is the self, should reflect throughout this. Um, Teal throughout all of this should just be a little more pitiable. Um, we should also bring back this idea of like, why does it matter? If not me, then somebody else would have done the things in my life that I was maybe destined to do. um, we need to just pull at these strings a little harder and make them resonate stronger throughout the last bit of this chapter here. Um, this is something important that kind of only could get brought up by the end of this chapter. Is Teal would start thinking about the Wanderer, right? The Wanderer and their professing of the many different branches of a life. This is something Teal would definitely be thinking about here at the end of the chapter. Um, and probably the realization at this point that the Wanderer knew all along that this is where Teal was going to end up. Um, Teal might be laying here and considering the other possibilities, the other branches of her life, the other things she could have done, but that she didn't do because this was her branch and this is where her end ultimately is. Um, yeah, she just doesn't really answer any. She doesn't offer any questions here. She should be really full of like just a spiraling quandary right now after her interaction with Azura. She should really be second guessing herself. She came to this point where she was pretty much okay with just like slowly detaching herself from her mind and her body, but talking to Azura should really grip her again and have her start thinking about like, okay, well, what did it mean to live? What does life mean? What did that crazy little guy in the valley mean when they were talking about all the different branches of a life? And right now, Teal doesn't think about any of those, and that's kind of unfortunate. Um, so a big part with the end of this chapter is I really did just write it in. I want to say, I want to say a flurry of mad abandonment. It was a very emotional, right? I don't know. Maybe it speaks, maybe it doesn't. This was a very emotional chapter for me to write. And a lot of it kind of just spilled out of me. A lot of it just flowed out of my heart, which never really happened for much of the rest of the book. Especially here, though, through the tears, through just like an agonizing moment of being in the zone, so to speak. This is where the last half of this chapter manifests from. And I think because of it, some parts of it read just like complete nonsense. A very emotional nonsense, very stuff I am very connected to, but ultimately nonsense nonetheless. So this point here is me just saying like so much of this just needs to be polished and tweaked and tuned up. And I think if I keep the core emotional resonance here, it's good. It's fantastic, I dare say. But draft 2 is going to really have a tough time taking all of this and refining it. Um, there's a beautiful little goodbye part where Teal finally says she kind of ends up at this point where she's ready to release all of her regrets and all of her longing for her previous life. And this section especially is just I might just keep this word for word. I don't know. I might tweak some of it, but the idea, this her sending out these heartfelt goodbyes to everyone she loved throughout her life, is really passionate, really lovely. Um, and it stings, right? I think that's what's so important is it stings so good that Teal finally comes to a point where she's willing to let go of her woes, right? Of her attachments. Um, maybe we have it centered, right? Maybe we give this the poetry treatment. Maybe we give this special paging. Um, Maybe each goodbye kind of has its own page, just to emphasize that there's like this dreary, drawn out departure that Teal is finally coming to terms with. Teal is going to die, and she's going to do it willingly. Um, I think I really like that idea because it sets up the next part really well. And the next part is this intervention of the corpse, right? Teal, the corpse, finally uh, um, kind of manifests in their own way and halts Teal, the mind, and says, "What about me? You said goodbye to everyone, but you're just going to leave me? That doesn't seem very right." Um, and throughout this, we've kind of been painting Teal sort of ascending, sort of rising from the corpse and departing from it. Um, and I think we need to just tinge this part with a little bit more of a languishing sorrow, this uh, um, kind of offset for, the corpse exists as a stationary being, that which is what Teal is letting go, and Teal in this ascending fashion as she starts to glow and depart from the corpse because she is, you know, giving up. She's saying, okay, I did it. I'm ready to rest in peace. Um, I think this just needs to be a more um, sordid affair, so to speak, something that really is drawn out and kind of bittersweet. Um, there's just we're almost done. We're getting there, right? We're basically at the end of the chapter. We're basically at the end of the notes. But there's a few sticky issues here, right? As Teal and the corpse reconcile with one another. Um, and this is basically the final moment of the corpse saying, even if it wasn't great, I liked living with you. Even if it wasn't perfect all the time, it was ours. And what more could we really ask for? And there's a few little sticky things here. First of all, there's no amulet. If what we're going along with to begin with, there's no amulet around Teal's neck, and that's kind of a big centerpiece here, as it is right now. The amulet starts to sparkle as the scene kind of goes on, and as Teal and the corpse reconcile with one another, as they come to terms, and um, they really just hug it out. Essentially, is where it goes. But there's this beautiful imagery of Teal's amulet shining and kind of engulfing the two in this brilliant light. And I have to wonder if maybe instead of the amulet, could we just do that with Teal's eyes? Maybe, I'm not so sure. But the amulet isn't here in draft two, so we got to get creative. Um, we need overall the corpse to be a little more heartfelt. They should be a little more emotional and almost kind of disjointed. Um, their speech should reflect this idea that they're trying to restrain tears, as if they're smiling, they're happy for Teal for departing, for finding peace, but it is literally killing them. It is literally their last moment to find peace with themselves. Um, so Teal, as they speak, the corpse, sorry, as they speak, should really reflect this physically, as if when they talk, it should be that they're stuttering, that they're gulping, that they're sobbing throughout it all. Um, yeah, well, we kind of get there eventually, but I think we should work our way into it a little more gradually. Um, we're just missing a lot of charm here. There's a lot of this dreamy beauty that exists in my mind that doesn't exist on the page, and I think I just need to take more time to pull that out of me, of to like to concoct something that is much more beautiful, much more fanciful to read, has a lot more magical charm. um part of this I have written down could be like a focus on the tears and the light and the shifting atmosphere, that as things progress more emotionally, so too does the light and the atmosphere engulfing the pair, quote unquote. They are a pair, they are existing in the scene as a pair, but they are the same individual, right? um and I think if we just take a more gradual approach and build up this radiance that is oncoming, it will feel warmer and more whole and more lovely overall. Um, yeah, the tears end up kind of like shining and radiating, and they look like little stars. And I think having the stars kind of converge and twists around the pair as they have their back and forth would be kind of beautiful. Maybe even the stars come together to form the shape of this golden moth. Because this is where we're getting back into tying Lacrimosa back into the scene, and I think it's really, really, really imperative that we make that motif known and that we incorporate it in a stunning way. Right now, yeah, the moth just kind of spawns out of nowhere, and I would much prefer it if this glowing moth motif is born from Teal's kind of sorrowful felicity. Um, it's important that we push this idea that she mourns both her death and cherishes her life despite all of it, despite the outcome of it, despite the ups and downs. Teal and the corpse both agree that, like, our life was our life and we deserved to live it. There's a little bit here right towards the end where um, the corpse is humming, right? The two kind of come together and meet each other on equal ground. And as they embrace, the corpse is humming, and there's this weird idea of like the Teal doesn't know if this song is real. That's just stupid. This should absolutely be a song that both the corpse and Teal recognize. It should definitely be the song that is always on Teal's mind, is the song that her and Caspian danced to all that time ago. Um, because by this point, right, by this point, we're finally putting the last puzzle piece in and saying, no, that dream in chapter 29 was a little maybe less than a dream, and it was a little more of a memory. And that song that Teal was haunted by from that point, that the Wanderer used to kind of poke fun at her and also comfort her weirdly, was actually the song that Teal and Caspian shared a dance with on that like fateful night of that, like, pretty romantic night a few years ago. um I think generally in these last few paragraphs we kind of just need to slow things down. This building of light, this reverie that we're sticking with needs to be more enchanting. Like I've said, I think just toning down the pace a little bit, things kind of just crop up, and I think by the end I'm just too eager to get to the next part. I think we need this to be uh, um, almost like the ending decrescendo of a concert, right? This should be a beautiful fading out as we tie a bow on this arc of Teal's story. Another important thing, and we're in the final stretch here, it's just a few more things, I promise. Another final thing would be to reincorporate the heartbeats after they've been gone for so long, to not so subtly suggest to the readers that Teal's heart, after all of this, is restarting. It's very, The Grinch Who Stole Christmas, but I just love the idea that we can recycle the motif and bring it back in a new life. We can take it from being this anxious, depleting, right? This terrible reminder of Teal's mortality to this, and reverse it, mirror it, because that's how it is. Mortality is just a reflection, a beautiful reflection of life, and one can't exist without the other, right? We can't exist in this wonderful space without the constant and foreboding knowledge of death. And maybe it isn't so foreboding. Maybe it is just an aspect of life. The two are interchangeable and forever intertwined. And I think that's a beautiful reminder if we bring back Teal's heartbeat right at the end to suggest that, yes, there is that sonic component. Yes, Teal is perhaps about to take part in a new journey in her life. And anyways, the moth motif, the moth just left, and that's such a fucking piss off. I really just dropped the moth motif right here at the end when it's most valuable. So me in the future, please don't do that. Please incorporate the moth more elegantly throughout the scene, and don't just forget about them right at the end, because we're also hinting at the fact that although Teal is about to be reborn, which spoilers alert right at the end here, chapter 39 exists afterwards, and Teal's back. Teal comes back. We are not so subtly hinting at the fact that although Teal is coming back, Lacrimosa through this process is also there with her. Why? I don't have to tell you shit, but they are. So bring back the frickin' moth into the scene. And one final thing, I think this final line, I deserve to live, maybe it just deserves its own page. Maybe I had this idea that perhaps this whole chapter has been printed on like gray paper, or maybe there's like a slow fade, right? Maybe we get from like 10% to 50% by the time the elevator opens with that ding, or maybe the ding itself is the first part where the pages start to be gray. And then I had this idea that once we get to this line, it kind of exists on its own page with sort of this beautiful kind of blooming radiance coming from the center where the line is. Um, yeah, I don't know visually how that would be. Once again, we're getting into the more of the realm of like visual arts, and that would have to be planned out at a later date. But I think it's all just really beautiful and stunning, and I think it suits the overall motifs we've been using here of like, you know, Teal breaking through this infinite uh, 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 shroud to come to terms with her life, and come to terms with her mortality, and come to terms with her faults and her beauty and all that she is, and also kind of like rebel against this notion that she has to accept her fate, that what she made mistakes on are going to seal her life forever. That her life, she shouldn't be giving up. That no matter what, she's going to fight for what she has. Which we maybe get into like a little bit of like anti-religion sentiment there. But I'm gonna leave that there, or else I'll start rambling for another 10 minutes. And folks, wow, we squeaked it in under 3 hours. I don't know how we did it. My vocal cords are about to just pop out of my throat because my body is sick of me talking constantly. I'm sick of me talking constantly. I'm sick of hearing my voice. I'm sure you are all sick of hearing my voice too. Thank you for coming. We made it to the end. We sprinted through 22 pages of notes. I skipped some of them. Chapter 38 is a beautiful chapter. It's one that I'm most proud of. Like I said, however, most of it was just like emotional diarrhea coming out of my hands. So it definitely needs a lot of fixing. I think, however, if we take these uh, um, additions, subtractions, these faults, these revisions seriously, I got it there in a few words. If we take these revisions seriously and apply them in a careful and uh, um, appreciative manner, then we're going to end up with a chapter that's even more nice to read, wholesome, and invigorating by the end of it. Um, like I said at the start of this episode, this is all for Teal, right? And if I can give Teal the best kind of funeral here, right? This chapter is sort of a funeral and sort of a rebirth all at once. And if I can make that as strong and um, gorgeous as I possibly can, then Teal deserves every ounce of effort it takes to make such a thing. Um, we're out here crafting diamonds out of coal. How's that expression go? I don't know. Anyways, folks, it hurts to hurt. It hurts to hurt. Yeah, it does. It sure does fucking hurt to hurt. Can you tell how goddamn exhausted I am? I'm losing it, everyone. I'm gonna sign off here before I uh, lose my voice. Thank you all for coming. I appreciate it so much. Thank you for all your patience today in listening to my rambling. Oh no, we won't. We won't be back next week. I am on vacation. I will be on vacation for about a week or so. We'll meet up sort of in the later half of May. Once again, though, thanks for coming. I appreciate your time and energy. I hope you enjoy the rest of your whatever. And I'll see you next time. Next time, chapter 39 honestly might be post-production. We might not do streams for it. Chapter 39 is broken up into sections, and each section has its own notes, which is very silly. So chapter 39 might be broken up, which would be episode 29. Episode 29 might be broken up into several different smaller parts. We'll see as we get there. Maybe this is the last Draft Diary stream, in which case, it's been a blast. The others will be uploaded. The other episodes will still be here for your enjoyment. But enough beating around the bush, everyone. I'm going to head out. Once again, enjoy the rest of your whatever. And I will see you all next time. Bye-bye.